fire, and they don't look like they're on fire when they're walking in them or through them. So there are fields out there. They see stars, oh, life could never be there. Maybe not carbon-based life, but natural crystic life is not carbon-based. Carbon-based is the mutation. And not all planets have it, but these do here, because this system has been highly mutated. All right. So what we are doing, basically, as we move back into becoming crystic life forms, we are going to, at some point, transform the carbons in our bodies back into silica and back into crystal life forms, where we will eventually become breatharians again. On Earth, it's already like that. If we were to walk through a gate, even if they dragged us through in a little bubble and then let that bubble go, we would die instantly, because we are carbon-based right now. But the aurora field is an in-between zone that will combine the matter bases of both places, that will give those who can slide, biologically slide, into these zones once they're activated and open, an opportunity to evolve further and to where they can fully transmute into the natural silica-based structure, so they could go to natural crystic planets. So it is a medium zone. They're called the aurora zones, and it has to do with something called aurora platforms. We'll talk more about those tomorrow. But this is the natural structure of each layer. Each layer would have its core, its liquid aquifers, its mantle, its crust, its atmosphere, and then its coronosphere. And when you start to embed those, you start to see something interesting. If this is the D2 level, and we're just looking at our D2 grid, now what we're not seeing yet, we're seeing where our inner atmosphere is, we're seeing where our thermosphere is, and from here you can start to get an idea where out in this area. Now, we can tell where the Van Allen belts are just by looking up in science books about how far from the core or from the surface, depending on how they're measuring it, up they are, right? We can tell that the Van Allens, we can tell where these lines are in our atmosphere by understanding that the Van Allens have specific how many miles up, and I still have to check all of those how many miles up, but the beloveds have shown us where the Van Allen belts fit in relation to this structure. So here you have Earth D2, and here you have the inner Van Allen belt running. So if you want to know where the Shaw and the Law fields are on the D2 grid, they're running in the inner Van Allen belt. Okay? There is something called the nets that are also running here that has to do with an event we'll talk more about tomorrow that happened in 9562 BC, in which certain parts, using the combined threshold and Metatronic technologies, beast technologies, they're able to reverse parts of the Partiki fields and create what are called hibernation zones, which is if you take this light field, for example, and force half of it, because you run a frequency net like this, force half of it to go on reverse spin, it would actually disappear from the other half. Where if you were standing here on Earth, you wouldn't be able to see what was up here anymore, because it just went in opposite particle rotation. And it would create a zone that was like a mirror image of this, that would evolve right alongside of it. And those with reverse codes would have a good time living there. We have bands in our atmosphere where our gods of Olympus exist, where our Oz exists. You'll never guess where Oz exists. In the ozone layer. I mean, geez, the stories have been being fed to us all along, like right before our noses, but we're so clueless. They must get a kick out of just laughing at us down here a lot, because it's like, oh, that's right, it's a lovely story about the Wizard of Oz, right? Wizard of the Ozone, hibernation zone, right? You think about holes in the ozone layer. Oh, dear, it looks like Oz has a hole. Looks like there's a hole in that hibernation zone, which means there's a hole in the frequency fence net that is holding the reversal in our grids. So there's some interesting things that are going to happen. We're going to learn some interesting things about when we're just dealing with, now this is the simple one, right? These diagrams get much more interesting. All right? This is just surface Earth, right? And what's down below the surface, all right? This is our inner atmosphere. This out here, this is where the inner Van Allen belt is. And out here, we should have our coronosphere, our D2 coronosphere. It should be like fire, right? It isn't right now. It's turned off because it's netted and the frequencies are literally blocked. All right, so we don't have our coronosphere turned on. But when we put this in relation to the next one of the Rasha bodies, which would be the D3 level, because remember they have D1, D2, D3, and then the density level forms the 4 sheaths of the Rasha Amore body, right? So this is just the D2 layer and sheath. The next one has to do with putting the two together, I think. Yeah, next one, please. So that one I have next. Yes. Now, if we remember, we saw this in terms of the Rasha Amore body and the sheaths, and this was just showing the D2 and the D3 ones, right? Now, I'd made that one in the Rasha set for the specific purpose of the next one that shows you them in terms of the earth. Next one, please. Thank you. If you could hold that one to the side, honey, if you could hold that one just to the side, just in case I want to put it back again, because it's clearer on the words. Now, you have the D2 grid and the D3 grid. Remember, the D2 is the telluric, emotional, / the one we see as physical body of the planet, or the Rashala. This is where our surface crust was in the D2 one. Now, the crust always happens at the Ra-Ka level, all right, between Ka 9 and Ra 10. Now, the Ra-Ka level of the D3 mental body planes is here, which means surface of mental body Earth is here. If our physical D2 physical crust is here, and this is our inner atmosphere here, which would be our Ra 10, going upward into the D3 grid, which means going upward in our atmosphere, there is another level that is known as the mental plane. This is the surface of the D3 mental plane. This is where you actually do have a different type of matter civilizations that are like ours. They are also part of the Mun reverse spin, where there are also hibernation zones there. But for now, if this was natural structure and we didn't have hibernation zones happening from the reversals, we would literally have our surface and our buildings and all of our cities here on D2 crust, and we'd have the D3 Earth crust as well, and that would give us the mental planes. When we project mentally, we actually go there. We have a version of ourselves in these places. All right? To be here implies you have a part there. Same thing if you put the D1 little grid in here. We each have a piece of ourselves in the D1 lower elemental kingdoms. So these would be the mental kingdoms up here, the mental planes, and these would be what we perceive as the physical planes, which are the D2 telluric emotional body planes, and then there would be the D1 etheric atomic planes. But from here, they would seem like they were the little tiny fairy people to us. And from here, they would probably seem really large compared to our size here. All right, so these would just be natural structures. What aren't natural structures are these things. These are the Van Allen belts. Now, I showed you where the inner Van Allen belt was in relation to when the one this size was actually this one when we looked at it closer, and now that's shrunk down and we're looking at the next one up. This was the inner Van Allen belt running here. And then there is what they call the gap zone between the Van Allens, and then there's the Van Allen outer belt here, and then out past there. Now this would correspond to our outer atmosphere. This would actually be our middle atmosphere, and inside here is what like the thermosphere would be at the top of the D2 Ra 10 layer, and literally everything like our weather and everything happens down below that, and the ozone layer is about halfway, I believe, in that. So these are the structures that are actually going up and out. And down, over in here, where we should have, somewhere over in here, we should have our coronosphere that's turned off, and instead we've got this net. Between, there are these nets that run, there are nets that are being generated by the threshold technologies combined with the beast technologies on the planet that create reverse frequency transmissions or broadcasts that have hit the Partiki templates and Partiki body of Earth to the point where they have reversed the spin on parts. They've literally cut some of the natural layers or whatever they're called, rings, in half and caused part of them to go in the opposite particle spin. These nets affect our DNA directly. There's a net that runs, I believe, in through here. There's other ones. This one is the D1 net. It actually corresponds to the D1 grid that you don't see here, but where it falls in relation to the surface that we know is it's halfway down the upper mantle, and halfway up into the atmosphere. Its border would be the ozone layer. All right, so from the ozone down to halfway down into the upper mantle is where there is a net of frequencies running that does not belong there. It literally creates a separation of these fields, which would be our Ra-10 field, that would be our inner atmosphere. So literally above the ozone, or from the ozone and going upward, we have a reverse spin area. And I don't have the diagrams right now that have all of them listed, but we found where Shambhala is, we found where Olympus is, we found where all these things of mythology, where they are. These stories have been fed to us by certain ones who live here. They actually, some of them have images of our bodies, but they are not human souls in them. They are ones that came through the time rips and have taken on the images that they hijacked. All right, they are connected to us from this. Yeah, nothing like your evil twin up there. You know? They're not exactly, and they're different. A while back we talked about, before like 2003 Hithara, when the shadow side fell, when Phantom Earth fell. These are different than than when we talked about Phantom Earth and when we talked about the shadow attachments that went with that. They had to do with certain aspects of Metatronic technology, but Phantom Earth fell with Parallel Earth in 2003 into the Wiesadrak matrix. These are something much more close to home directly, where they're literally directly up in our atmosphere, and they're different. It's another layer of the corruption of the natural cellular body structure of this planetary system. So we don't have to worry right now too much about whatever that might resemble our gene code that runs around up there, because we're running around down here trying to figure out how to get out of here. No. Sorry, that was just a little side venting there. So we have the mental planes. Now, anyway, there's one net here. This D1 level net is called the Dharma net. That's the one that runs from about halfway up the upper mantle up to the ozone, through the ozone layer. There is another net layer that runs here from about halfway through the inner Van Allen belt to about halfway into the Van Allen gap. There is another net. That's called the intra-net. That's the D2 net. I-N-T-R-A, intra. We're not picking on anybody's nets here. Right. There is a third net that runs in the outer layer of the outer Van Allen belt and up out of that a bit into the outer atmosphere toward the magnetosphere and that kind of stuff. And these are specific miles up, right? Because you can track it by how far up the Van Allens are, and they've showed us where the Van Allens fit in the Rasha body structure of the planet. So this is called the epinet, or epigenetic overlay net, EgoNet for short. That's the D3 mental body net. Now, these nets each correspond to one of the sheaths. Remember, we talked about these were the 4 sheath levels, right? The D1 sheath, the D2 sheath, the D3 sheath, and then the density sheath that are part of the natural, whatever it's called, Rasha Amore body. All right? Well, these sheaths also correspond to DNA. We have the D1 level, which is considered the inner sheath that sets that is considered DNA template. We have the D2 level, that is what is considered the DNA. All right, that is the D2 sheath. We have the D3 level, which is considered the epigenetic overlay, which science is just now finding is a layer of chemicals that exist on the DNA that actually control what genes turn off and what genes turn on. So it appears that the epigenetics have more to do with what the genes do than just the genes themselves. Now, each of these nets control one aspect of those things. The D1 net controls the DNA template. The D2 net, which is the emotional body net, controls chemically the biochemicals that are manufactured through the DNA and run through the body and form the DNA itself, which regulate what is going to go on in your body chemically, hormonally, mentally. Why? Because if you have a lot of polarizing frequencies coming in there, you'll have a lot of polarizing chemicals, and you'll be very bipolar and be susceptible to becoming a timeshare and things like that. All right? These nets were done on purpose. This was done on purpose so body snatches would be easy, so we would be lost in space. The reason we're lost in space is because these nets completely block our cellular memory. They block our etheric memory on the D1 level. They block our natural emotional body D2 level memory, and they block the D3 memory, because this is the one, the D3 net that's running out here in the outer part of the Van Allen belt and a little bit beyond it. That is the epinet or the ego net that controls the mental body or the epigenetic overlay. So that is actually the control net. That, because the epigenetic overlay's instructions will tell the DNA below it what to do. So these are the sheaths, and they're controlling the sheath bodies. And this is what when we want to project somewhere up there, out there, away from here, it helps to not fall into a hibernation zone or get entangled in the net. And that's why we've waited until we could teach this kind of Rachelet body training before we'd ever teach people how to do astral projection directly. Great! Nothing like getting caught and entangled in a net and getting yourself falling down a black hole before anything else does. Because that is what happens to people when they start playing with pentagrams and making them spin. Then yes, you can bounce yourself out of body that way, but God knows where you're going to end up unless you do it the right way. And they have given us the right way to journey. And the right way to journey is, first of all, knowing what you're journeying through. All right? Because there are some nasty spaces out there that you can accidentally trip into and just like move a little bit too far to the left instead of to the right, and you'll feel this current just suck you in and like grab you and take you, and you really have to fight to get yourself to a stable space and go, help, somebody, right? You know, somebody on the good side, right? That kind of thing. Somebody that doesn't want to take you in a black hole. Right? So what the techniques that we use are made specifically to hold the frequency encryptions and the mathematical directions that will lead you through safe zones that are called Aurora platforms. There are Aurora platforms that exist among this that will help you hop, skip, and jump through the hibernation zone so you don't get trapped in those areas when you first learn to glide. And then later, those areas will open up and blend into one field that will allow those who can to slide, which will be to physically be able to slide into the aurora zones that are between here and Eartha. Now, I would like to show you where we have the D2 Earth levels, the D3 Earth levels. Where is Eartha? Right? Can we have the next one, please, honey? Thank you. Oh, this was just showing you more on the nets. There's these seals, by the way. These seals are called the seals on the aquifers. Because of all the mess here, the beloveds have had to seal the aquifer levels to literally block, for Shala 13 particularly, because they've already taken over core gates Urta 14 and Ruta 15 historically. Shala 13 was the only gate left that wasn't compromised and put on reverse. If they took that one and put it on reverse, they would have compacted the core 3 gates and shut off the prana seed and initiated Bardo fully on the planet. That has not happened yet. And it had to do with the aquiferian seals. They sealed each level, D1, D2, D3, and the density level of the aquifers that were the D4, 5, and or the 4, 5, and 6 layers in the Jaleesic body, right, or in the Partiki bodies. They have opened those seals as of that we began opening the aquifer seals, the core of them, all the way from here up to Eartha in the 12 Tribes 1 class in January. So part of this is opening the aquifer seals to allow the frequencies directly to come through. It's opening the flows, the water, the silica, the lava flows between the natural body of Earth and the natural body of Eartha. Now, we'll go on to the next one, please. We can get more into the really scribbly drawings like this tomorrow. Do I need this one yet? This is just showing you, I think, where the nets are running. Dermanet, intranet, and other one. No, I want to see if I need this one here for right now. I don't think I do. This stuff I'll talk about tomorrow. Yeah, I want to get to where is Eartha, because that's where we're going to journey to. And I want to show you how the maps work before you journey. What you got there? Just put it up, honey. I can tell if it's something I need. Okay, D3 elemental and atmospheric, Jaleesic radiation layers, Earth's outer atmosphere. Yeah, they're just showing the seals again. There's a lot of information on this that I don't need to do right now. This is the mental body plane. This is the surface of the mental body plane. This is the surface of Earth. You'll see more of these tomorrow. Next one, please. Just keep those in sequence, okay? Yeah, do I need any of this information? I just want to make sure if I need any of this information tonight. Nope. Next one. Yes. Finally. Here we go. Right? I was so excited when I saw how close it was. Right? I was like a kid, and they're just like, oh, hi. This is the D3 mental plane. This is where we are now on the D2 surface crust, right? This is the D3 grid. Now, remember, these are the embedded shaped grids, right? So where the Rajna and Iyumbi are on the larger grid is where the smaller grid would be, which means where the points of a grid are is the Rajna and the Iyumbi of the next one up. So you would have a line coming across here for the density level one. The density level of Earth's Rasha Amori body structure is at the same place as the D1 level, the one that would be the little one inside, of Eartha. All right? So our density grid corresponds with Eartha's D1 level, which means then Eartha's D2 level. To do this, you'd have to have like a huge wall to actually expand the whole thing out. But what we can do is show the layers by knowing how far what Kathara grids would go up and where on a single one where each of the layers form. Now, the Raka always ends up in its Kathara grid for that layer. It always ends up running this way between the Iyumbi and the Rajna, the 9.5 and the 3.5, the 3.5 Iyumbi and the Rajna. Okay, so that's the Raka layer there of the D3 grid. The next one, it won't be the D4 grid because Eartha is still a D3 star. All right, we're still in density 1. This is a hosting planet, so it not only has its 4 layers, it will have the 4 layers of Eartha as well. So you have a D1, D2, and D3 level of Eartha before you ever get to Terra, which is D4, 5, and 6 of Earth or Eartha corresponding. So we're still in density 1. So you have our D1, D2, and D3 templates. Then you would have our density template, which equals Eartha D1 template. Then you'd have the next one up from there is Eartha D2 template and Eartha D3 template. Eartha's D2 template, just like our D2 template, is where the physical structure exists. All right, is where you would perceive it. If you get to Eartha to perceive it as physical, you would perceive it from the 3rd layer, and you would perceive the 2nd layer as physical, and the 1st layer would be the etheric atomic layer. All right, it works that way on any of the the 3-dimensional sets. So what that means is we have this direct connection. Here's our Van Allen belts again that don't belong in there. Here's our nets that make sure we can't see stuff out of there from up here. And here we get into, there's all these correspondences that would show you, because Eartha's D1 grid would be here, the bigger one that you don't even see here yet. All of its layers, it has its 15 layers, or whatever you want to call them, the 15 structure. We go all the way down to the core. We meet at the core. So our system is actually in the center of the star body called Eartha. We're inside, below its mantle. We're actually, I believe, our light field here, our Ra 10 field, that is the light around the space around our objects on the surface of our planet, that corresponds with Eartha's D2 Adama level. Remember, we have the first one is the Nada, the second one is the Adama. So our 10 is their D2 level 2, all right, when it comes to it. What it simply means is going up vertically from where we are on surface. We would go up and out. We would be past the outer Van Allen belt, past the net that runs a bit outside of the outer Van Allen belt, and here we would find Eartha D2 Ta field, which is the lower mantle on the D2 grid, which is the physical lower mantle. We'd have the middle mantle at Eartha D2 8 Ma, and we'd have Eartha D2 Ka 9 upper mantle, and here you would have the Raka crust, right? Here's where you would have surface, physical Eartha. On the Ma 8 layers, on all of them, what is characteristic of them is they're a biome field where you have crystal temples. Earth has them too. but they are not Adashi temples. Once upon a time, they opened to the Adashi temples, but they were long ago hijacked and damaged since that point. But Eartha has Adashi temples that are physical, beautiful, crystalline structures. I mean, they're massive. They're like going through crystal skyscrapers that are actually in the middle mantle. That'd be as if they were crystal skyscrapers. Down under, way down under, further than they dig for oil and that kind of stuff, way down there. What's interesting is in the last, 10 years, there's even internet sites about it, where they found amazing, huge selenite crystal caverns quite deep down. One of them is in Chihuahua, Mexico. And they found a bunch of them even on Earth. So if those type of crystal beds that exist within the planet's body, there are also larger ones, massive ones, that exist within the body of Eartha. And within them, they are inhabited. They are inhabited by various different races, and they are also midway stations where people can come to escape places that are going under, not just from here. They receive a lot of others from this falling matrix, actually. They're one of their purposes of their planet right now, and always was since the Amenti mission was set. Eartha was always a place that would assist in, it was a midway station where it would get whoever was coming in whatever dire straits they might be in, to their next best level of evolution and try to help them out of trouble on the Christic paths. All right, so it's still doing its thing, and thank God it's there. All right, but it's a lot closer than I ever imagined. So when we do our journeys, what we are going to do is, there are some things that are characteristic of the aquifers as well, where there are doorways in the aquifers, and I believe it's on the 6 layers. So wherever you have a I think they're not shown on here. They're on some of them, but they're really convoluted looking maps right now because I'm just getting these straightened out. But in the aquifers, there are a set of doorways that are water caves, where it's actually, when you go to them, it's as if you dive under and you go through this doorway that's actually filled with water. It's an underwater doorway, and you pop up somewhere else. There are a series of doorways that you need to move through, both through D1, D2, and D3, in order to get to the doorways up here that get to it. So there are maps. We call them vertical maps. Now here we've got circle maps, but vertical maps come off circle maps in a very interesting way. How close are we to those? Because I want to go there now. Not yet. No, I'm going to save all that messy stuff for tomorrow. Talk about hibernation zones. Nah, save that too. Yeah, who needs more misery tonight? We talked enough about nets. No, I think I'm going to go the other one. I'll show those later. I'll show those tomorrow. Yeah, no, keep going. Let's see. Yeah, we'll start with that one, because I think that's the one that the vertical comes off of. There's a lot of information on some of these. Right? It shows where nets are. It shows where hibernation zones are, where the split fields are. Now this is where you're going to be traveling to get up to here, right? It shows there are these bands here that are referred to as aurora zones. There are 4 aurora zones that actually are bands. They're not just little spots. They're actually bands that run in specific areas that are safe zones that help you leap from a natural zone through a hibernation zone so you can land in the auroras. Eventually those auroras will open. When we activate the gyrodome fully in Peru, they will merge and they will form a sphere within the sphere that will be on natural crystic rotation, and that will be the space that we can start sliding into. But before we can slide, before those platforms are open or those spheres are open to each other, what we need to do is glide, which is learn to project up and start visiting up there and start finding out what it means to ascend. And it starts with the Adashi currents that take you on the back currents back to source, and the Adashi temples, which are in this area. And somewhere up there, you'd have Earth's surface, where they also have temples and beautiful things there too, but the radiation would be so strong, unless you're silica-based, that carbon-based life, as we know it here, wouldn't survive. So we're going to have these zones open here and create a field once the gyrodome activates that will create the aurora slide zone, the aurora field, that will allow parts of this to become visible and parts of our Earth to remain visible. So it will be like a blended field that is a host field, and it will be protected progressively by the activation of the aqualene sun frequencies from the aqualene transmissions. So, yeah, we'll have the aurora zone fields coming from the aurora platforms once they fully activate. But in the meantime, we have aurora platforms that when we move through journeys, we move to the aurora platforms. And sometimes in these journeys, you'll find yourself going left or going right or going straight. Or the instructions are important because they're actually calibrated to these maps directly. I'll show you how you get a vertical map, and it's pretty easy, out of a circular map. Now, if you think of this is a spherical map, really. It's a sphere as if it was, say, an orange and you cut it in half, right? You're looking at a cross-section of it from its core outward, or an onion, or whatever. I like oranges better. They smell better. Next one. Now, this is where we have to stick them together in the corner, right? Remember how we did that? Yeah. All the way around this end, right? Okay. Now that lines up with, I got to flip that over first, right? Okay, now bring this point down and over here, all the way over here, all the way right, that dot there should go there. Just over a little bit, okay, up a little bit. Anyway, right there, stop, right there, almost. You get the idea. If you put a dot on that vertical line from every ring from the core going outward, right, and then take that dot and put it on the edge of a paper and bring that over horizontally, first you will get the breakout of how far between each other those planes are, all right, those layers are. Then we can let go of the circle now. Thank you. Thank you. Now, once you've got let's bring this back a little bit further. Once you've got this, now this corresponded to each level where you had the nada, like the bands actually. The nada would be in here, the adama would be in here. Now, if you did this for the D1, and then the D2, and then the D3 level, and then the density level equals the D1 of Eartha level, right? By the end, you would get, let me bring that down this way, please. All right. And the Eartha D2 level. So you have Earth D1, Earth D2, Earth D3, which is the mental plane, right? Physical, emotional plane, etheric plane. D3, mental plane, Earth. Density, Earth, connecting into D1, etheric atomic, Eartha. D2, physical, emotional, body, Eartha. Okay. When you put those all together, you get a vertical map. Now, we are here. This is where, if you trace this over to the D2 grid, D2 surface, right? Trace that over in these lines. That's right there. Each one of these places, right, is a coordinate. Now, some of them have doorways. The doorways are appearing at the 6.5 layer between the 6 jada and the 7 ta. So on the D2 layer, there would be D2 physical doorways. Now, these are down in the mantle, between the mantle and the aquifers, the lower mantle and the upper aquifers. So you'd have a set of physical doorways. Just follow that line across. You go across it after a while, especially when you get down into the tinies, right? You would have a set of physical doorways here, all right? These correspond to the lower mantle of Earth going into the liquid core area, all right? There are pathways, by the way, that you can take some doors and others. Sometimes you go to the core, sometimes you go up to a set of etheric doors and then go down. There are pathways through to get to the aurora zones. Now, down here you have the etheric doorways, and they would appear at the same level, but on the D1 thing, at the 6.5 layer. So 6.5 at each layer would have a set of doorways. 6.5 on the D3 grids. 6 is here. 6.5 would be here. If you follow this over, now the D3 grids, that would be the mental body, right? In relation to where we are, there would be, whoops, I lost my line here. There's my line. It's dotted over here. Goes over here. Right there, there would be a set of mental body doorways that appear etheric. There would be the cloud doorways. They would be the subterranean D3 mental plane doorways. They are still appearing below where we are on surface, right? So you can tell once you put all of these together what doorways are in relation to where you are as far as standing on the crust. And this is how we've pulled the vertical maps. These were hard, and they're just started as far as breaking them out. It gets so tiny down here, you go, what is down there? Right? What's down there at the core? Right? So I'll show you what we do with them the next stage of what we're doing. What we have here, however, though, is on each one of these, the breakout of the Jaleesic layers and bands, let's just call them layers and bands for the moment, you have the Adama flame level, you have the core crystal, the non-core crystal, you have the Adama flame level, and you have the Jaffa, which appears like a void layer between. That would be the density 1 layer, or the inner solid core. Then you have the aquifers from the 4, 5, and 6 layer, and you have doors at the top of the aquifer at 6.5. This applies to every one of those single-dimensional scales. Then you have up here on the Ma 8 levels, you have subterranean biomes, all right? And they would be, for us, the subterranean biomes would be in the middle mantle. They are middle mantle biomes that appear in whichever layer of the middle mantle, because each one of these has a middle mantle, has its core layer, has its aquifers. But when you put them all together, you get some interesting things in interesting places. Like here, it might be the middle mantle for the D1 level of Eartha, but for us, it's in our clouds, because our surface is here. It's way up in our clouds, right? Just like here, this one, we're actually here. This is our crust here. This is the mental body crust, all right? And the mental body doorways, or which doorways are these? So you'd have to trace it back over. And nope, they're not. These are the D1 Eartha doorways that end up in our mental body cloud cities surface level. You see how this works? We'll go over it more tomorrow to look at it more closely. But when you are doing journeys, you are doing a journey that is specifically calibrated through where you are to be able to make the entry points through where they need to be made, to be able to hop, skip, and jump up through what sets of doorways you need to get to in order to get up here in the D2 Eartha level of the middle mantle, the Ma 8 level, which is where the Adashi temples are. All right? So your journey will take you through these. And certain turns are right, certain turns are left, and they will literally get you through the mathematical coordinates so you can maneuver through here without falling through any of the hibernation reverse zones. Because it's funny, I found myself in one of those trying to rescue one of our cats, actually, who had died a while back, and I found myself in a sati state of some sort, and I was trying to rescue her, and I was caught in this really nasty current, and it was like trying to push through a nasty wind that was so strong it could almost like rip me apart, like rip my atoms apart. And there were these little platforms I had to keep throwing myself over. They were always to the left. I had to keep throwing myself to the left. What is that? Where am I? But I knew I was going for something important. I had to find my cat, is what I found out was at the end of it, because I didn't even know. I just knew I had to go forward. It was important, right? Later I found out these are the Aurora platforms I was actually throwing myself on, because I was actually cruising the currents that run between the auroras and hibernation zones, because my cat person had been pulled into one of the hibernation zones, and I needed to get her out. And I didn't know that on a conscious level, but that's where I ended up in one of my satis. So there are some very strange experiences you can have, particularly with the hibernation zones. They're not pleasant, and they look like physical. When you're moving through them, it's like being in a physical space, even though your physical body is asleep. Just like when you start with sati journeys. A lot of times you'll find you have to lay your body down, but you go out and you're more awake and you actually feel more alive once you get out of the physical body. All right, they'll only take you and help you to learn to do that if you promise you're not going to leave your physical body and refuse to come back, though. Just so you know, okay? If they think you're just going to say, nope, I'm going to pull that cord right now, don't ever want to go back down there. Because it does feel good when you start getting out into the higher spaces of the aurora fields and stuff. But the idea is to bring your body out, not to just cut the cord and leave it there. So that you will be worked with. You're already being worked with. All of us are on that level of as far as anybody on the ascension path. They're not going to let you pull your own plug because you're so close at this point. It would be really self-defeating. Plus, you might get stuck in the hibernation zone if you lost the quantum your body is carrying. Our bodies are important because they carry part of our quantum thrust. And if we lose some of that light quotient, it may be the difference between having enough BPR or speed to get our Merkabas up and such fast enough that we can make the leaps we need to get to the places we want to go. So our bodies are actually, they have been like a curse for a very long time on this planet, but they are also a great gift. And now that we're getting the Aurora sun, aqualene sun frequencies back, we will begin to be able to heal them better than we ever have. I can't say we can heal them overnight, but we will be able to support them in ways that we haven't been able to before, and the bodies will support us too. So this is where we are going to begin our journeys. We have the higher elemental kingdoms that correspond with the D1 etheric atomic level of Eartha. We have the lower elemental kingdoms that correspond with the D1 etheric atomic level of Earth. This is where you have little fairies and big fairies and giants, right? The big fairies and giants are coming from up here. They would both appear etheric-like, or like more ghost-like, or not quite fully solid-like, right? Then there are ones that are fully solid. Biomes that are fully solid from D2 Eartha, biomes that are fully solid from D2 Earth, including subterraneans. Yes, we have physical subterraneans in our middle mantle. There are physical ones. What's really weird is when you go there, it actually looks like you're on the surface of somewhere. There is a backlighting that it's as if there's a sun somewhere, but you can't really see a sun. There is a radiant light field where there is day, and I don't know if there is night. I don't know how they work there, but I've passed through one, and I couldn't believe it was a subterranean biome because it was like being on the surface with a light sky, except you couldn't see where the sun was. You couldn't pinpoint it, but it was light like the sky would be in the daytime. So they're fascinating places. Next one, please, and we're almost there before everybody's too tired to go. Huh? I know. Is everybody going to survive? We could take a vote if they'd rather do it in the morning. We could take a vote if they'd rather do it in the morning. It is an option because it's already open. They're not the ones opening it. The thing is already open. But we'll take a vote. All right. Anyway, this, to look at closer, that little scribbly thing that you saw running up as the last column on that other one is this, right? Now, to see what in the world is going on down here, the next step is to take, say, this section, and I think it ends, we've got from, I think we have this far. This up to the top of that comes up to here, right? All of this are the layers here. And I'm beginning the process, the crazy, insane process of trying to label each one. Which set of doorways are these? Are they physical or are they etheric? They're showing where the waters are, where the crusts are, where the Alon, Shalons, and Kalon crystal beds are, where these guys here correspond to I believe, the Nada crystal layers of D2 Earth. So there are physical, I think that's where these are. There are physical structures that run through our mantle that are physical crystal structures that are actually the D2 Nada level of Eartha. So some of the crystal temples below our crust are actually the Nada 1 layer of the crystals that make up the core crystal of Eartha. This field here, this is the Adama layer of D2 Eartha. It's our light field. Our surface crust is right here. So the light field that is the space between our objects, that is the natural EM frequency here, is actually the D2 level of the Adama layer in the Eartha core. So their core is huge compared to the size of our core and compared to the size of our planet, where it's so big that their simple layer 2 in their Jaleesic structure is where our Rakha layer is, that is the 9.5 layer. All right. So this is showing you a little bit closer up. Eventually we're going to do clear ones on these, where we can show you some of these are so beautiful. Some of the places are absolutely gorgeous. And they are real places. These are the planes that exist. That's why we wanted to show you from first creation where the Rashala bodies are created, what they have to do with things, and how they manifest in literally something very, very practical, the planet that you're living on. I think tomorrow I'm going to have to bring the physical bodies into it and put some of this in relation to where is our personal Rasha bodies and see where they take me with there, because they haven't showed me anything on that yet. So you'll be the first to know that bit. We had some of this information, but there's a whole block of Rasha bodies that took you from the Partiki template up through to understand the formation of the Rasha bodies that we hadn't had for the 12 tribes classes yet. They were literally just getting like a jump from one place to the next, and here's the maps, and here's what we're doing. And it's like, okay, right, oh boy, yeah, hold on to your seats, because there's a lot of information that we needed, but there wasn't time to give the graphs before the activations had to be done. So what you've got was the first round of showing the entire sequence of how this works. Now, what I'd like to do is kind of like just show of hands. It takes an hour and 45 minutes for this journey. Would you prefer to do it in the morning? We got yeses and nos. I know, I just wanted to get the general feel. Wait a minute. I'm going to put it at council. I'm going to ask council what the best way to do what? Yeah, this could be run right before. Whose opinion? Okay. Yeah. I was, yeah. I'm trying, okay. Yeah, that's true. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. I'm getting the nod from them as well. Okay. Well, that was kind of a mixed yes, no, yes, no. And what is most important during these journeys, particularly when you're lucky because you're not the ones that have to be. Your systems won't be taxed because you're not activating them. They're already opened and activated. You will be riding a wave. However, being awake will be important on this one. Being fresh will be important on this one. I didn't mean to have it go so late. However, if I wasn't able to give you the graphs that filled in the sequences, you would get a lot less out of this journey you're taking because you wouldn't really understand the significance of where you're going and why. Each one of the graphs you've seen is like a code. Like we always say, the graphs are also mathematical codes, just like the pretty ones with the flames and things that you do optical pineal induction on. You've got a whole bunch of mathematical sequencing now that will allow you to access the next level, that will allow you to journey. I've ran workshops till 7 in the morning before, and half the people, bless them, are falling off their seats because they're so tired. This is a journey, I would honestly say, I would rather do have you do tomorrow. You already have got your crystals. Now, I don't know where the little flame guy ended up. Okay, it still needs to go. All right, because just so everybody gets to do their little download of crystals. What you can do, since we're going to do this tomorrow, we'll figure out what the best time to do it is. No, I'm getting 12:12. Yeah, that's what I just got. All right. Yeah. What time is it now? No, they're saying 12:12 daytime. They're saying do it tomorrow, daytime, 12:12. All right. Which means it doesn't really need prep to it, this one, does it? I mean, the whole thing is, the introduction and the whole journey is an hour and 45 minutes, right? Yeah. They would like to run it for 12:12 tomorrow. All right. There's something with the coordinates. It has probably something to do with whatever else is activating that we don't know about yet fully. Okay. Now, I appreciate your patience in moving through this with me. I hope you've appreciated I hope I was able to convey it in a way that works. I guess that means I did okay. Thank you. I'm sorry for those of you who really wanted to journey tonight. I'm sorry that it really is a better decision for everybody to do it fresh, plus something's coming in tomorrow at 12:12 that I don't know about yet. But if you would like to begin, and you've already done the thing with the crystal, before you go to sleep tonight, they're saying that those who want to begin contact with the Adashi group, you can do just like 3 times of squeezing the crystals in the hand and kind of like an inhale while you do it, right? And then other times you can just massage them a little and it just does it anyway. And then put out the intention that you would like to go to the Adashi temples. And there's somebody that's going to come and meet everybody that does that. and take you someplace. You can't get in there until you do the full access journey with the wave, which is, they're saying, is better off being done tomorrow. It was no mistake that we ran late. Thank you. They always do that to me. But, oh well. All right, you'll get a stronger burst going up as far as getting up in there into the journey tomorrow. But tonight, just simply put out that you would like to visit, the Adashi. They will be able to take you to some of the Aurora, like Aurora 1 or 2 or 3 platforms. It depends on where your own codes are. So there will be someone coming to see who's around that wants to go out into what is called a glide projection. All right, this is before we slide, we do the glides. So they're already aware of us. They're already willing to work with whoever would like to. And again, it is the Aquafarion group now. They're part angelic human and human cloister and part of the Aquari races, of the Bendy races. So they're not the full-strain Bendies, they're the intermediary ones. They will be the people who assist us and that we meet first when we go into full physical slide into the Aurora zones after that's all activated, after the Peru trip and things. So anyway, I'm not going to keep babbling at you tonight. Go vertical when you go to sleep. Try going vertical and just see what happens. Try feeling it out. But before you do the little 3 times squeeze, right? And just imagine the image of that flame thing, the crystal that passed by you. Imagine that, and then imagine yourself inside of it. All right, that's actually the beginning. That will trigger it as an image that will trigger certain activations that had to do with Journey 2. And because they're already open, that will trigger the beginning activations in your own Rashala body, or Rashala body layers of the aqualene sun. So you'll have protection. So even just aiming vertical within the aqualene sun field will keep you out of most trouble. It won't get you. You might see some interesting incarnational stuff. That you could scare yourself with incarnational stuff, but if you have any bad experience with that, realize you didn't fall into a hibernation zone. All right, you're only flashing past some of your own memory imprints, that some of which might not be great, others might be. So you can play with the crystals that you have in your hand tonight, and you can use the image of the glass crystal, fire water flame, as they call it, that we use, because that is the image that was used in Journey 2. All right, they used that image and took it further, so that will plug you into the Journey 2, even though you're not going through the words of Journey 2. And when it comes to tomorrow, we will do at 12:12. I don't know what they have scheduled before that, but for 12:12, we will run that journey that takes about an hour and 45 minutes. But at least you will be awake and fresh. They do suggest that you can eat lightly, but don't, try not to eat real heavy. You can eat, you don't have to be hungry. But in fact, it's better off that you're not hungry, because so you don't get lightheaded and want to pass out and that kind of stuff, but don't eat huge amounts. And they are asking that, not that anybody should be worrying about it at that time of day, but to have no alcohol in your system if you possibly can. All right, they have no problem with alcohol, but certain things are best off, certain activations are best off without that present, and this is one of those. And it's going to be 12:12 noon, so it's no biggie, just skip the cocktail at lunch, that kind of thing. Can the champagne breakfast for today, that. Right? If you would, because it will set better. The activations will set better in your system if you don't have alcohol when you first do this journey. All right? So sometimes alcohol can make you get really sick, actually, when you start bringing in the heats. And if it's hot energy that's coming in, which it will be with this, you don't want to put it over the edge with making it hotter with the alcohol in the blood. All right? So just a suggestion. Anyway, yes? Okay, you want to say you?
Well, just practicalities. Can you just remind us, where is the crystal in the room right now? Okay, it's going real slow if it's coming to the front, isn't it? Now look, it's going to the back. Okay, well that's going to make life a lot easier. Would you pass the crystal to Mac before we leave the room this evening? And what Mac will do is to facilitate, for those people who have not spent time with it yet, from 10 o'clock tomorrow morning in here, the crystal will be here. So those of you who have not yet actually done what you need to do with it can do it between 10 and 12 o'clock, and that should get the job done, all right? Yeah? So we'll let that... Do they need to... No, they won't, but Matt could bring it right after breakfast.
I was going to say, they could, if somebody can make sure we get it back tonight in the room.
I'll stay here tonight.
You sure?
Well, do you really
okay.
really want to do that?
I would like for them to... There's not that many of them left. There's only 2 rows in the back. If they could stay to finish getting the download of the crystals, then they can have the journey tonight too. that go with him, if Mac is willing to do that. I'm ready to fall over, and I have more graphs to do, and I know we're both exhausted.
The thing is, the contact doesn't take more than 10, not even 10 seconds, really.
Yeah. People like to get to know it a little. Right, I know. You don't mind? All right, thank you. So how's that? For those who do want to make sure you get your crystals in your palm tonight so you can play with the journeying tonight on the Aurora platforms, that Mac is going to stay so you can just, when you're done with the crystal, just give it to her so she can get it back to us, okay? Because we're supposed to keep that with our space because it's keyed to our house. All right? Yeah. Live transmission since before dawn this morning, and they wanted to get us to a certain point of understanding some new graph stuff. And one of the things is so you can take home with you the first rendition of a functional vertical map that shows where what is what, because it can be used for projection when you're at home. Don't mind me, I'm a little bit tired. It's been a very, very long day embedded in graphology. There's also an activation coming through that I think was one that wasn't exactly expected. Ours were expected, but I have a feeling there's something else happening too, just because of the feel of the energy that's moving around and through. So we are going to, at the end of this, I do know one thing. We are going to do a live technique that has to do with the first activation in the indigo shield, which means in the bodies of the indigos that are first present during that. And if you happen to be angelic, human, or hosting or whatever, and you're here anyway, you'll get that too. It's prana exchange. We'll explain toward the end what prana exchange is and why it is significant. We'll also go through a little bit more of understanding the vertical maps and the relationship of Earth to the other planes. We briefly covered them yesterday, and we briefly covered the net zones and those kind of things. We're going to look more closely at those, at what they do, at where they are in the bodies, and what's going to happen to them in relation to the aqualene sun activations. Because when we put those pieces of knowledge together, we can start to understand that when we do the aqualene sun activation, which the next part of it is initiating prana exchange within the indigo shield, we will begin to see some interesting things happening. And from what it looks like, it could get pretty interesting in the world out there, because the aqualene sun and the frequencies it comes in on, or the locations it comes in on, in the Rashalay body and in the physical body, will actually begin to dissolve the nets. And before we cheer, though, what might that mean? The hibernation zones are on the other side of those nets. Right. And I'm wondering, I have a feeling we'll be on, they're with me now still, and we're going to be a live wave tonight, so there will be things that kind of fall out of me that I didn't know yet either, that they're holding it back for, the dispensation to the group. But we look like we're going for some very interesting things. The last page that you will be getting with the little handouts, and I'm so glad we were at least able to give you some kind of summary handouts. Even the 12 tribes people haven't been able to get those. This is the first time anybody's been able to get anything that you could read, right? You're welcome. The last one you will get is precious. This took hours because it's all analyzed in relation to what is where. All right, so it's accurate, so you don't accidentally, kind of like follow you can use it as a projection journey. Actually imagine yourself going up the things that you see there. You could have it enlarged or whatever. It is copyrighted material. It will eventually be tweaked even further. But that information gives you, there's a whole new block of data that came through. And as usual, I'll start at the end and go back to the beginning of where I was planning to start my graph sequence. They're doing this. There is something I did not understand at all about this. They'd never mentioned it before. But the only thing they've ever said was there were the three star systems in our universal Vecca that is falling that do have gyrodome facilities, and that one was Eartha and Earth, and Sirius B, and Andromeda. And that's all they ever really mentioned, and that they would be the passageway that hooked into the Anshatesa passage over in the aqueous hub in order to sustain the ability of this planet actually down here as part of the USG3 set to be able to keep its core gates open, to be able to reinitiate temporarily, at least on respirator of the ancestation passage, the prana exchange within the planetary core. Now, what the indigo shield is going to do, they are going to be the ones down here that anchor that ability to actually begin the prana exchange for Earth, because the beloveds are on Eartha. That's the closest they are, which isn't too far away. But they need a team on this side in order to do that. So the mission that we're a part of is really huge. But I didn't understand something until they had me go through all these things of the sizings of the Cathara grids. And, all right, we know that we have the D1, the D2, the D3, and then the density level of our 15-layer bodies. Then we go into the density. They've always said the density 1 level of ours connects to the D1 level of Eartha's. And that's how we start to understand how far up the different layers of the Eartha planes are. But what happens when you go up to D2 Eartha, then D3 Eartha, then density Eartha, right? Eartha's density grid connects to something too. Just like our grid as a hosting planet into Eartha connects to the D1 level of Eartha. Eartha isn't hosting, but the natural way these stargates work is Eartha's density grid connects into, and I was going, I bet I know, it's Terra, right? What used to be Terra, which is Alcyone, or whatever that thing is that blew up a long time ago. And they said, no, actually. If you look at the position of the 3 on the Cathara grid, and what's right above it, Sirius B. Right, which is even larger than the star known as Eartha, which means something fascinating. When we find that the D1 core crystal of Eartha is actually running the crystal beds that run through our, I believe, upper mantle, we'll look at that in a little bit, the same applies up there, which means the Adashi temples are actually the Sirius B. They connect directly into the Sirius B core crystal. Right, into density 2, into another gyrodome planet, which means it has the ability to run the Anson-Statia passage. So this is the last ascension passage that is being opened, that you can get out of this system on any of the densities. But I was really thrilled to know about that, and I know there's a reason that I don't know yet what it is, that they wanted to bring the graphology to the point where I could see that, so I could talk about it. There's something going to happen that has to do with Sirius B tonight, and I'm not sure what it is, but I have a feeling it's something extra that was perhaps planned for maybe Peru or maybe the next 12 tribes class, but something is going on with the other side. They're throwing something, and I can feel it in the grids, and there's some kind of, we find out when we're in the middle of it kind of thing. So the other side doesn't know what we're doing to try to stop it, right? There's something happening with the Sirius B temples. I think they're activating the crystal beds of Sirius B, which means they're activating first the gyrodome on Sirius B. And that's going to do something here, and I don't know what, but hopefully by the end of the evening we'll understand more about that. We know we're going to do the prana exchange and begin that process in the indigo shield, and it will be at a process that's functional enough by the time the Peru trip occurs, where we will be able to go and do, like literally host the planet and restart the gates. There's been something that's been going on historically recently that we've been in literally battles, not just astral either, weird stuff happening on 3D for the Elon Kalon sites and that kind of thing. But in the period building up to the 25th of March, when the solar gates did compact, there were some very, very strange things going on with the frequencies that the Borgia matrix were throwing through their time rope triangulation. And part of what they were doing were going after they were trying to activate at full throttle the Urta gate, Urta 14, which is down someplace off the coast of Brazil. And they were trying to activate that full throttle on reverse. It would have taken out all of the people with codes that connect to that, which would have been the Gold Dragon lines and the Gold Flame people and all of that kind of stuff. But they're going to tell me to do something with that information. All right, hold on, excuse me. Don't mind me, I'm online, haven't been since this morning. All right. So, yeah. All right. Right, conquest. All right. We've been in the middle for about a week before the May 25th period. There's been a conquest for these gates. That's right, I'm sorry, March 25th, for these gates. And they're from these two different periods in history where Ruta was reversed first, which was Ruta 15, and that's over in the North Atlantic somewhere, and Urta was later reversed to the point where they were both reversed. These are the two smaller gates connected to the prana seed, the core prana seed of the planet. There was something done in that week moving up to, or it happened actually during, as the Borgia were trying to take over and activate the reversals on full throttle, when our beloveds did the bounce back thing that sent part of their frequencies back, we were able to turn some of that and do what was called a core reclamation on two of those, on both of them, on Urta and Ruta. So even though the outer part of their shields are still spinning in reverse and holding the hibernation zones, the cores were reclaimed, I believe, on the 23rd and 24th of March. So we now have the ability to begin the process of planetary prana seed activation, because while those gates were reversed, it phase locks the prana seed, and it actually phase locked it open, where it was like trying to bleed the seed atom, where it would like let energy hemorrhage out of the seed atom, but no backflow going back. So we're going to do. They wanted us to know that there was a reclamation done on the cores of Ruta and Urta over a very short period ago, and this was clearing something that, let me see if I can remember the dates. I usually know them, but when I'm this tired, it's a little bit hard. 9562 BC was when both of them fell under Borgia control, but 15,400 BC is when Ruta fell under the Anu control and under a group that became known as the Sovereign Order of the Golden Serpent. Yeah, they're out and about these days too. They call themselves something else sovereign. I won't go there though. Yeah, they're affiliated with some ancient groups of Illuminati lines that have come up. One of them were what they called Knights Paraclete, and they had to do with the particular group of Illuminati race lines that were raised from the Tothian Leviathan races, and another one called the Knights Saxony that were from the Sachion lines that have to do with Samjazi and the Palladians and the Bellicudium. So these guys are active right now as far as on planet. They had a plan, and this is part of what the I wouldn't say interference, but typical response that we're having energetically is coming from the group that works with these guys. They have an agenda where they would love to work with our material, particularly gate maps and things, because what they wanted to create was sovereign fall of this system. They wanted the Borgia destroyed, and then they wanted to take over that technology and use it to eat the Wiesa matrix, and then be masters of the universe. There is a very large force of these guys in human form on the planet. They are kind of like a secret version of the Freemason groups and stuff. Even the Freemasons don't deal with them directly. They're Illuminati of the Illuminati of the Illuminati kind of thing. And they're up to something that we may know about by the end of the night, and I think that's why they wanted me to just move in and touch on those things. But when we talk about the things that have happened on this planet, and historically, we go back, billions of years, but this is very, very current, the drama we're in. What we're going to see, and I was really excited about one thing with the new information that came through. I knew they were there someplace. I knew it had to do with the hibernation zones, but I didn't know where. Where did Atlantis and Lemuria go? I know they still exist. And we found them. We know where they are. We also have the specific locations of where places like Olympus and the etheric Mount Shasta and Telos and Oz and several other, Shambhala, a few interesting ones. We have exactly where they are now, what hibernation zones they're connected to, and this kind of thing. These races tend to, the Illuminati races that I had mentioned that have to do with the Sovereign Order of the Golden Serpent, which was referring to the Metatronic spiral running through the threshold apparatus. They have a direct affiliation with one of the controlling groups in the hibernation zones that are called the Beli Mahatma groups. And at a certain point, the Beli Mahatma actually kind of were asking for the assistance from the Krystics because the Borgia were going to take them out. But they have since made deals with the Borgia, especially now that the Borgia are terrified and looking for somewhere to jump to, because the Borgia are finding their matrix is going into Nova. And because they're going into Nova, they're not just going into Bardo, they're going into Nova because of what they threw, and it's coming back. And it's just doing particle-antiparticle annihilation. So we have Borgias trying to jump ship, get off the Titanic, and find a matrix they can jump into. There is something going on with this. And I don't know why they wanted me to bring this up right now either. Probably come back to it later when we know something else, but they just wanted me to touch on those things. But we will be able to see where the Atlantis and Lemuria things are. I have a feeling, and there was always, in the New Age movement, there was always this wonderful mythology that Atlantis would rise again, and there would like be, new lands popping up in the ocean. Now, I don't know if it's going there, but there was a reason that those myths were created. What happens when you activate aqualene sun and it burns off the net fields? What happens? And I still don't know the answer to that. What happens when the nets come down, especially if they come down quickly? And hibernation zones all of a sudden are on the same spin as we are? These places are filled with very not nice people who have very not nice agendas, like the Zetas happen to be hanging out in the Atlantean and Lemurian part. That's where they're coming in from. That's not where they started, but that's where they're coming in from. They have their bases there and that kind of thing. And these places, some of them are etheric, some of them are what's called atmic, all right, which is atomic, so it's a different level of atom matter. And some of them are purely physical, like we are, and the Atlantean ones are in that zone. They are a physical manifestation because they're in a D2 hibernation zone. So what we're looking toward at this point, I'm not even sure. I keep kind of going, oh my God, we're going to do that. That's going to happen. Oh, that's going to happen. What does that mean in 3D? What are we going to be looking at? So hopefully we'll have more of that by the end, but we'll start with the graphs. One of the things that we didn't cover yesterday when we talked about the relationship between Earth and Eartha, we've explained, but I didn't show this graph before. This is just a rough one. Most of them are at this point. We've explained how if this, you could consider this Eartha's body, and these aren't proportional. This is just saying, for example, this would be Eartha's body and Eartha's Rashalite body as well, where it has all the layers of the Jaleesic layers and bands and rings and spans and fields and shields. There we go. So this is just showing you one circle inside another, meaning Earth's sphere and Earth sphere. In between the two of them is where the aurora bands run. And they're like a buffer field that it's actually has allowed for, it has been holding Earth in position in its host. The aurora field was a natural part of the Amenti mission in the first place. But it's because of the aurora field that technologies, krystar technologies like the gyrodome can be used. That if we'll notice here, if this was north on Eartha, which means that would align with the Cathara grid of the universal Cathara grid, and up here you'd find, this would be 3, and you'd have Cathara Center 6, or Sirius B, USG 6, Sirius B up there. So this would be natural north for Eartha. Earth was aligned in that way also when it was first placed in the host 550 million years ago after the fall of Tara. Earth was an anchor planet, actually. There used to be the old mythologies that everything revolved around the Earth before whoever it was discovered that everything revolved around the sun. In a certain way, everything did revolve around the Earth because the Earth was the anchor planet. The Earth revolved around with Eartha and Sala. They both revolved around. The sun was held, our soul was held in place through a link to the Earth, the Sala gate, Sala 4 gate, and through the Iyumbi. And this is why our sun ended up in trouble, because when the Iyumbi time rep happened coming through from the Adore side, they just broke right into the host there and were able to access Earth. But Earth, from the sun. But Earth, literally, with Eartha, rotates around, because a Cathara grid, when you see a Cathara grid and the spheres, they rotate on their vertical axes. And so the Cathara grids are spinning. And that has to do with our solar planes, where if Sala and Sol have this relationship, they have a different relationship. If they had this relationship, there'd be no central sun that anybody was revolving around in the solar system. So Sala was actually put in where it links through a set of tunnels into the Iyumbi lock that would be in the middle of the Cathara grid, and SG4 that would be over here on the Cathara grid. And SG4 goes away from it sometimes, right? Because the whole Cathara grid is revolving, but it makes the appearance of our Earth and the two planets going toward Sol and the ones coming out behind it makes it look like it made an artificial plane, basically, within the larger shield that was revolving around the Iumbi, because both of them were revolving around the Iumbi, and both Sala and Eartha are stars, or central suns. They each have a solar system, which means when we ever get up there, if we get up there physically to Eartha, it will be the center sun, which means around it there will be other things revolving, except they won't be, they will be krystic, and that means they'll be breathing, and that means they will look like stars or suns, but they will have life planes on them too. So Eartha, even though Earth and Eartha are in the same place, technically, where Earth is literally inside of the body of Eartha, once you get out here on the surface, you'd have a whole different perspective on the solar system around you, on the stars around you, and you would find Eartha is indeed at the center of its solar plane. So it's interesting experiences once we get to the point where we're out there. It would feel like you're on another planet completely, because the whole star configuration wouldn't be what it looks like from here. Now, I wanted to show you this because what has happened through the progression of the beast machine activations and threshold activations and the mess that has been here that started way before we came this time around, the north axis is no longer here, aligned with Earth's north axis. Well, we know it has like the 23.5 degree shift, and then the other part of it's like 11.5 degree or whatever it is shift over there, and it creates the wobble and the elliptical plane that's not natural, that gives us our equinox and our seasons and all of that. They're not natural configurations. They have to do with the tilt. We'll find some interesting things out, too, as we move on from here, because it's not just that Earth is tilted here at 23.5 degrees to this axis. You'll see in a minute how badly Earth is actually tilted in relation to Eartha. Now, what that would mean, if the aurora field weren't there and the spanner gate capacity weren't there, it would mean the gates wouldn't align. That even though there once upon a time were gates that were put in Earth that would connect into Eartha, they would be all misaligned because of the misalignment of the axes. The aurora field actually counterbalances that, and what it does is, once it's activated with the gyrodome, with the gyrodome activations, it begins to spin. The aurora field spins, and it actually, where it will align at certain times, the gates, because it has a set of gates that match Earth's and a set of gates that match Eartha's, and it will rotate. And as it's rotating, it will line up. It will make like little doors that open, where it's hitting the right gate sets. So it's almost like combination lock, what the aurora field creates, where it'll open and close the gates as it spins, but at least it will allow for an alignment to take place, because you can't have vertical alignments or straight alignments anymore. It will give you a little bend field where you can go, say if you want to get to a gate that, from here to a gate that's over here, and you want to go here where it should be, but all of a sudden you find it's like down here and it doesn't cut through that way. This field would rotate, it would take you down to here, then as it rotated back up here, you'd be able to go in the gate there. So it would be like a relay station, or it's not a midway station. There's something else called a midway station that they just informed me about on the graphs that we'll get into. But the relationship between Eartha and Earth is not straightforward as it was when the Amente host was set in place, where all the gates lined up and that kind of thing. Spanner gates are interesting because what you find is, I don't have them drawn yet, but there would be 12 spanner gates connecting to the 12 arc gates on Earth, and then there would be 12 spanner gates connecting into the main gate sets of Eartha through the aurora field. And the spanner gates through the aurora field would look like a flower with 12 petals, because they make loops. They go up and they span. They make bridges between, and then those bridges would connect into Dashi temples and take you to the corresponding, natural planetary stargate on the system. The next one, please, honey. Sorry. Which one do I have there? Oh, yeah. A little closer look up at Earth. Right? If we're just looking at Earth, I'm not going to go into this heavily, but if this is the Cathara grid that's supposed to be around Earth's body and light body, it's supposed to be vertical, and it's not. This would be the Eartha alignment, and also the natural alignment for Sala, or for the solar plane, that would take you up into the density 2 gates and alignments and that kind of thing. But what we have now is this instead. It's tilted. That's showing, again, the 23.5 degree shift over this way, but it's more interesting even than this. This is what we talked about when we were exposing the Metatronic mess that's being taught on this planet, where you have the poison apple. We call this the poison apple magnetic fields, because they're unnatural magnetic fields that create a tube torus lock-in, which is like an electromagnetic net, instead of, if you had normal fields, I don't have the graphs here, but we have them from way back, where you would actually have the planetary rod that runs through the sides of it. You had the staff running down vertically, and then the rod would be horizontal. You'd normally have fields coming up like this and going through the arc, and it looks more like a butterfly configuration. It's supposed to look like a butterfly, and that allows the top and bottom vortices and the side vortices to be open so it can receive natural transmissions from the solar plane, from the sun itself, and so the sides can catch the solar winds and actually use them to generate. But right now, what is the situation is we've had for a very long time these poison apple-shaped magnetic fields that artificially hold in. They actually are part of the system that holds in the axis tilt. We've got these, we call them trumpets. They're like big satellite dishes. They're vortices. They're not metal satellite dishes. They're literally spinning vortices of energy that are generated at the core, and the distortions that were created from the golden serpent grid, which is the beast machine Metatronic stuff plugged into the threshold time rip stuff that allowed for a full activation of the Fibonacci spiral here with an upside down Taran light seed and all of that stuff that we talked about in Tenerife. So we're sitting here in the middle of this mess. It also created the unnatural configuration of energy kind of turning in on itself perpetually, which is this shape. The yin-yang symbol refers to, that is literally the shape of energy flows when you have this Metatronic and threshold setup. So Earth has been in trouble for a long time. This is just the end of, getting toward the end of the story. And this is just a close-up of that little tilted thing you saw inside the larger Eartha. And next one, please. Now, if we look a little more closely at the Rochelle body structures, and if this is Eartha, this would represent Earth's relationship to it right now, except look at north, Eartha north. Look at what's up here at the 23.5 degree tilt. We're not just 23.5 degrees tilted, we're 180, and 180 degrees, then 23.5 tilted. Basically, Australia faces North Eartha, right? The South Pole area, minus 23.5 degrees, right? What this is interesting, because when you look at things in like regular books that show you things about like the Van Allen belts, right? Now, we know where the Van Allen belts are in relation to the grids that we saw yesterday, and I'll go back to those again, where let's pretend the bigger one's not there, and as if this were straight, right? All right, this is the rod. The Van Allen belts are coming off this way from Earth, right? Okay. Now, because it's tipped upside down, it's kind of funny, because down here you'll see these diagrams in like science books and stuff that try to show you the Van Allen belts, and actually this is how they will show you them upside down. When you're looking at them in the book, they actually need to be tipped the other way to get actually what is taking place, because our north is actually down in relation to what is natural universal north in this matrix and all of that. So I wanted to show you first of all that when we're dealing with seeing the Van Allen belts, when you see those little diagrams that you might see, if you want to look more into them or whatever, the first thing, anything they tell you about it, you need to turn the whole thing upside down where north is pointing down, and that will give you a more accurate representation of the relationship that we are working toward, which is understanding our relationship to Eartha. Now, if it weren't for the aurora field, once it's activated into a gyrodome, that can make up the difference of those problems with rotation, because this would be a shift in AARP. Angular rotation of particle spin would be very, very affected by this. So the natural alignments that you would normally make you wouldn't be able to make without the aurora field. So the aurora field actually will, and once it's fully activated, will take up the balance of this, and they won't have to turn our planet back around, which would be quite cataclysmic, particularly where waters were concerned, right? Not to mention volcanoes and all sorts of other things, right? It's not an option at this point to try to turn Earth back the right way around in order to open the gates. But the aurora field, once it's activated as the aurora zone, will allow for, even though we're upside down, it will make the differences in angular rotation of particle spin and BPR, base pulse rhythm. So all we have to do is like aim vertical, basically. Now when we do stands with the 12 tribes classes, when we do like the large stand-up spin, do those kind of things and configurations that we're doing in 12 tribes classes, we do have to align them to south, which is interesting because usually people think of aligning to north. So it's like if you want to sleep with your head pointed north, point it south here at this point, and then 23.5 degrees. I mean, it gets nuts with this. It's enough to make a dyslexic triply dyslexic. And I swear, the more activated I become and the more I'm able to go and journey and see things, the more I'm having trouble with the left-right thing, where I'm actually finding myself writing from whatever this is to whatever this is, this way, right, instead of this way. I'm not even going to try right and left. I get totally weirded out with right and left at this point. So if you find yourself going through like periods of being dyslexic and you never were, it has to do with your body codes getting used to the natural frequencies. Because if you turn something upside down, it also reverses right and left, right? Right. As we're bringing in the eartha codes and more of those, our bodies are kind of going, wait a minute, who's on first? Which is right, which is left? At least we know up from down, or at least we think we do, biologically speaking. But some of the things that, like conditions like dyslexia and dyspraxia and those left-right reversal things that are happening have to do with this, because the north and south are reversed, which means the east and west are also reversed from natural order. And more of the frequencies of the natural order are coming in at this point. So it's going to get very strange on this planet, stranger than it already is. So I just wanted for you to know that if you're ever, some people like to look up stuff and get more information on the Van Allen belts and that kind of stuff. And if you're someone like that likes to do that, just know that you would look at their diagrams that they show you upside down, and it would reverse. It would put everything in perspective in relation to Earth. Then Eartha would still be the one at the top, like its north would still be up here, but you'd have to look at us that way. All right, next one, please. Sorry again. Here we go. Back to the diagrams we started looking at yesterday that have to do with Earth's D2 Rachalet Partiki body and the 15 ring fields that come from the Partiki template rings that come from the gel layers, and the 15 shields that come from the orbs or spans, which come from the crystal bands. All right, so we're just looking at that again. And this one is just showing one set. So let's say that's the D2 Earth, all right, grid. Now, these come in sets of 4, remember, a D1, D2, D3, and a density level. And that has to do with the, what was it called, Rasha Amareya body that had the 4 sheaths. So the 4 sheaths form the 4-dimensional bands in a set. So this is just looking at the D2 level, and we're looking at that because that's the one we see as solid here. And I just wanted to remind you first that we do have, these are broken down into the first 3 layers form what is called the solid core, and it's actually frozen ethers, and it also has meta-Ls in there from the key processes. So it's frozen metal and ethers as a solid core. Where are they? They are fields 1, 2, and 3. Yes, fields 4, 5, and 6. These we refer to as the aquifers because in the Partiki body, they are fluids. They are liquids. They would have, some of them would. There's actually, I think the 4 is a band of silica gel, actually, liquid silica, and then there are lava layers and also underground water, as far as underground ocean type water. And these would refer to the flows. So when we talk about the aquifers, we're talking about this particular part. What science refers to that theoretical place as is as the liquid core, which they assume is there because it has to do with spinning through the metal solid spinning through the liquid that creates the electromagnetic fields on this planet, is how science tends to look at it, I think. And when you come out from there, you're dealing with the 3 levels of the mantle, where the lower mantle, which would be the Ta 7, the middle mantle, which would be the Ma 8, and the upper mantle, which would be the Ka 9 layer. And then the next layer out, or the next, let's not call them layers, let's call them what they are. They are fields. The next field out would be the Ra 10 field. And in between those two, you'd have the 9.5 span or shield, and that would be the Ra-Ka, because you have Ka and Ra, and you read them going this way, Ra-Ka. So that would be the rock, and that forms our crust. So this is where we are now, right? Just to remember these, because we kind of went through them fast yesterday, because these become important, at least having a grasp on the fact that there are these divisions in the planetary body and in the atmosphere as we go up from there, because this is where we start to understand where the nets are running and what they're affecting, but where they are running. And more importantly, we start to understand where the aurora zones are, because right now the gyrodome isn't activated yet, and it means the aurora zone isn't fully opened yet. It means there are 4 platforms that are like spheres that you can access different layers of the safe zones, the aurora safe zones. But it is not a fully activated field yet that you can slide into 3D biologically. That's what will happen after the Peru trip, when the activations there are done. It will start something called the prana exchange on the planetary level that will allow those aurora zones to come to, or aurora platforms to come together to form the aurora field or the aurora zone. But so when we're looking at these layers, it helps to just to remember that there's the 1, 2, 3 layer. I'm just going to call them layers at this point. They're shields and fields. 1, 2, 3 layers, solid core. Then you have the liquid core, 4, 5, and 6, the aquifers. Then you have the 7, 8, and 9, which are the mantle layers. Then you have the 10, 11, and 12. That would be Ra-10 field. These begin our atmosphere. Now, the Ra-10 field, the top of the Ra-10 field, which would be here, it would be the band between 10 and 11, which would be the 10.5 band, which is the Shara band. That corresponds to our thermosphere in the atmosphere. So when you look up in science books, I haven't had time to plug this into the science books yet and look up how many miles up whatever is. But at this point, you can actually put miles on these maps. All you have to do is cross-reference it with a couple of science books, because a lot of them say different things about how far what is up where. But you can find out how far down things go into the earth and how far up they go when you know certain key things. And one of them is this band right here that would be at the top of the Ra-10 field, is on the D2 grid, is the thermosphere, is what we refer to as the thermosphere. And that means everything down here. This is where all weather occurs. This is the ozone layer is right around here, about halfway through. All right, and we'll find out some interesting things about the ozone layer, too. I'm wondering what all these activations that the sun is going to go through, what they're going to do to the ozone layer. Because the ozone layer and the Van Allen bands are actually formed from the nets. So I wonder if there's probably a plan of controlled net release. Because if you just shut the things off or block the things that were holding the nets up at this point, it would probably be a mess. It would probably wipe out the ozone layer very, very quickly. And without the ozone layer at this point, we'd all get poisoned from what is coming off the sun before the aurora field is there or the aqualene sun field is activated to buffer it. So I imagine there's going to be some kind of controlled release of the nets, I think. If not, they're preparing us for that 3-day evac that they've talked about on occasion, and I don't think they are. So we don't have to worry too much about that right now. I think they would tell us. Then again, maybe they wouldn't, because we'd go tell like 100 other people, and 100 other people tell 100 other people. And then there would be way too many people to get anybody out anywhere. So I don't know how they would run that, and I don't feel it's coming, though, right now. But this layer here is literally what we walk around in. It's the light field that we see. It's part of what on the outside, if these are the Rasha bodies, the Rasha body, these are the inside ones, not going back into the inner domains or anything, but just the inside of the outer ones. And outside of that would be the ray spectra that of the full outer body, and we'll see that in a little bit too, that was manifested from these. So this actually creates this area creates the trion field that we've talked about before. We have the trion light field, and then inside of that the meage field, and outside of that the rayon field. So these correspond to that. This area would correspond to the trion field. Now, when we come out from here, we go from the D10, the 10 field, all right, the Ra-10 field. Then we'd have the Sha 11 field, the La 12 field, and then coming out further, we have the 13, 14, and 15 fields, which are the Ka, Tha, Ra fields. When we go into the various things that culminate in the aqualene sun activation of the Rachelet bodies, it means turning on these bands here, 12, 13, 14, and 15, in the 3 layers, or actually 4 layers, but the D1, D2, and D3 layer and the density layer of the bodies. This is what is going to happen with the planet, too, once we can hold the host for that, once the indigo shield can hold the host for that. That will create the buffer field that will allow a buffer field around the planet, as well as coming from Sala 4 to protect and transmute the frequencies that are going to be coming off the sun because of it going into its Bardo stage with compaction of its core gates. So, right now, we're just looking at the easy one. These diagrams get very, very complex. We tried really, really hard to have the last page you got be 2 pages, but the master was fine, the drawn one, but the copies were so bad you couldn't read any of the layers anyway, so it would have been just frustrating. So we're going to wait until we can get proper copies made of them before we release them. But they show them in relation to not only the Earth's body, and of course it showed the D2 one inside of that. Right now we're looking at D2, but imagine that shrinking down, and then this size one would be D3, right? That's what we're looking at on the next pages we'll look at. So when you see the little grid in here, it started out as the first diagram you saw big. You shrink that down and put it inside the D3 grid, and then you'll be looking at the D3 grid and the same setup. But there's different layers of the atmosphere that form from that. All right, now we've got up to the D2 surface Earth and the Ra light field, the Ra 10 light field. As we come out here, we've got Earth D2 inner Van Allen belt is right out in this area. And then the gap zone would be out here. When we look at the bigger map that has this shrunk down into the center and it expands outward further, when we see the D3 level of the Rachelet body, that's when we can start to see where the 2 Van Allen belts are, where the gap between them is, and all of that. And our thermosphere looks like it's way down in there once we get into those larger maps. So this one I wanted to show you so you could remember that at the core there's a solid core that has three fields, rings, layers to it, that there's a liquid, they call that the solid inner core, then the liquid outer core, aquifers, then the mantle layers, and then the atmosphere, the inner atmosphere, and then the various layers of the atmosphere going out from there. 13, 14, and 15 constitute what's called the coronosphere. They're what, under normal circumstances, would give a fire layer to a natural star or planet. And when you see things like suns that are burning, you're seeing a part of their D2 level of their coronosphere. Our D2 coronosphere was shut off because of the tilt and because of the mess that the nets are creating in the fields. And it literally is blocked, so it can't turn on. One of the things that is going to be happening, and I don't know how fast, but with the activations that are taking place now because of what's happening on the sun, it's like, at this point, it's not something we're doing. It's like it's going to happen, whether we assist the Earth in dealing with this process or not. These frequencies are going to be letting go. But progressively, that layer of the D2 Earth is going to be turned back on once the indigo host is fully activated enough to be able to hold it. And before that, we would have to have it turned on in the indigo shield. And then we would be able to host that and stimulate that in Earth's environment. Now, they're not going to just let us go and like, yeah, here you go, guys, here's a match, light up the light up the coronosphere here. Where is that in relation to the Van Allen belt? It's right in between them, probably. I believe it falls somewhere in between them. I'll have to look on the bigger one. But that would not be really great as far as most of the life forms on this planet here right now, because it would create radiation that would just vaporize everybody. And that's not the intention of the beloveds, to vaporize everybody. So there will be, they have extreme measures, I'm sure, to make sure that these things can be turned on, but in a way that is stabilized. And I think that's part of the job that the indigo shield itself holds. That's what they mean by the indigo host, that because our fields can run it and can hold these frequencies, they can turn on certain levels of it within the Earth, but perhaps over a long period of time or something where it doesn't create dire circumstances for life forms here. But in the meantime, it creates the buffer field on the planet that it needs to make it through starfire, and also needs to make it through the frequencies that are going to be emitting from Sol now that it's going to go into gamma phase. So this is the beginning of understanding the maps, and I just wanted to go over those. We did touch on these yesterday. So we just remember coronosphere, atmosphere, mantle, aquifers or liquid core, and solid core. So it's as simple as that. There's 5 layers, each with three fields, rings, layers. There's so many words at this point that it gets a bit nuts trying to talk about it quickly, especially when one's tired. Next one, please. Oh, here we go. They get more fun. We're still looking at just the D2 one. All right. Now, this is before we go into the expanded atmosphere where we find out where the Van Allen gap is and Van Allen number 2 and all of that. We're just going to look at first the presence of the net. And these have been actually corrected more, so I probably will go into this more on the one I spent part of the day doing. But I just wanted to show you these ones we were given for 12 tribes. Well, whatever class, I think it might have been the first one. And we got through the diagrams this far. Just to show you that when we are looking at, when we're talking about vertical maps, it's like this. What you're looking at here, this is from like a science book. Well, it has extra stuff put on it. But the science book showed Earth as a sphere cut in half, showed its little core point, showed this little highlighted V here, and that highlighted V is here. It's like a cross-section taken out of the sphere, right, to show you vertically the different layers. And this is what science books show, where there's the inner solid core, the outer liquid core, the mantle, and they call it the upper mantle. The difference is we have these divided into middle, upper, and upper, middle, and lower mantles, but it's the same space, and then the crust. So these that you find in science books correspond to these diagrams. But these diagrams were done first before we found any of those references, which I thought was really funny, because I remember leafing through someone going, "Oh, neat, look at that. That looks almost like what we just drew." And they said, "Mm-hmm." Yeah. And they said, "Yeah, take a copy of that so you can show the sphere and that," because it would take me much longer to sit there and draw that with its shading and all of that kind of thing. So, but it just gives you the understanding of what the vertical maps are about. They're the maps going up and down from Earth, from the center of Earth, all the way up and all the way down. So they're the vertical maps. I imagine there's ones that probably go down this way too, but we're working on these at the moment, because the aurora field, even though we're going up, which will technically be south Earth, oh God, right? The aurora fields will spin us around and get us to be able to go through into the Earth, the things on the proper axis. I'm really glad for that, because if we had to calculate what they were to get through a gate, I don't think we'd have many people getting through the other side. Right? Like, oh no, we were off by 3 decimal points. You know what I mean? Whoops, how many zeros were at that? Right? Because it's all mathematical. It's heavy navigational coordinates when you're working with the stargates. You know, it's like, it makes like flying planes and driving ships, you know, look easy. Driving ships, sailing might be the word for that. So anyway. Oh, this is just showing the D2 one again. This is our surface Earth with our little trees and houses and things on it. This was just to show you that there are a set of seals. There's actually 2 more that go out here, but the ones that are immediately in the D2 level are the 7 seals, another set of 7 seals. These are the seals on the aquifers, because through our D2 Rushley body of Earth, if you remember that this, at the core, we are united with Eartha, and that means we're inside of Eartha's body. It's as if this were Eartha and we're here. So there are all these layers and things, fields, layers, shields, all those 15 structures that pertain to Eartha's body as well, and they run through ours. So their D1 through 3 level runs through our levels and is just bigger. And we'll see where they fit in with each other as we start to show the embedding maps. That's how we can tell where out in the atmosphere, in relation to the Van Allen belts as a reference point, where certain parts of Eartha exist, where the D2 physical Eartha is in relation to physical Earth, where the Adashi temples are, which are physical temples. There are other etheric temples, both on Earth or in Earth and in Eartha, but because they're coming through on the D2 level, which is telluric atomic, we have the etheric atomic coming through on D1, we have telluric atomic coming through on D2, and we have atomic atomic coming through on D3. They're different types of matter base. And it's the telluric one that we see as solid when we are in a 3-dimensional system. So there are layers that are just as physical, and they actually seem more physical because everything's bigger there. We're a small body inside of a larger one, so things are larger and more expanded when you get up into the earth realms. But these seals are actually on aquifers between Earth's aquifers and the aquifers of Eartha. There are channels that link, that are literally different steps through different types of matter that link the water flows. And a long time ago, at different stages, there were seals put in by the beloveds from Eartha, by the Aquiferian races and by the Bendy Aurora races, to, once the hibernation zones had happened, to prevent Eartha from being raided by the creeps that created the hibernation zones. And what they have done, I'm sorry, I'm tired. It's nothing personal, I can love creeps too, Creeps refers to the behavior, not the core essence of the being that was Christic once upon a time. It's just modern slang. Right. Seriously, I don't hold a grudge against these guys. At this point, why should anybody bother? I mean, it's not about grudges. It's about it's not about getting off this planet. It's about getting out of this planet, because we're like sealed in this little bubble down here, and it's like a prison bubble, and we're in the process of being sprung from our cell, actually, because during the first 12 Tribes class, and that was funny because we didn't know about any stuff about this. I didn't even know what 12 Tribes classes were supposed to be about, just like a lot of workshops. I show up and find out too, and that's how they've been working lately when it's on security clearance. But what we did in the first 12 Tribes class was an elemental master command stand, which is called the Cloud Walker stand, that opened these seals, the core of each of these seals, going all the way up. It opened the full one down here, and then the like, say, D1 level, or the one, it's not even D1, it's the layer 1 in each of them going all the way up. And so they began to open the flows through the aquifers, and they come right down into the core gates, and the one core gate that has been that's functioning is Shala 13, and that's the one in Phoenix. That's why we have always been called into this area. It's actually under Phoenix, part of Scottsdale, a bit of Tempe, like up more northern Tempe and southern Scottsdale. It goes up to northern Scottsdale too. It's large. The access point to it is probably small when you get down into Earth core. It's probably a tiny point of light that you pass through or something. But it comes out in a cone, and they haven't told me the parameter yet of in this area where it is. But we're in a key spot, and we were asked to purchase a house in a key spot. That fortunately was southern Scottsdale, not northern, because we wouldn't have been able to, because prices are not inexpensive here. And somehow the beloveds have guided us and had people come to workshops, and my beloved is a very good manager, and we've had enough to be able to put something on the table to a mortgage company and say, we're really, really nice people and pay our bills. See, we have a long history of paying our bills, and we actually got a mortgage for it. So I was amazed. But we were doing these these weren't because we wanted to go and buy a house. I mean, if we had sat down and thought of, gee, where would we like to buy a house? Guaranteed it wouldn't have been either in Colorado exactly where we bought it, or in Arizona exactly where we bought it. It wasn't about what we wanted. It was about what needed to be secured fast. And that's what this was about. It's like it's kind of nice. It's a good thing it's not recognized, because the price would be really, really high on it if they realized the two places are sitting on sacred sites. If this hotel, if people recognize this in the outside world, if they realize this hotel is also sitting on a sacred site, it would be very inaccessible to most people, probably, as far as price-wise at least. But what's nice about the net is it keeps everybody dumb about other things too, which it works in our advantage sometimes. So we have secured the Elan, what's called Elan 7 and Shalan 7 sites, and we knew they're important. We knew they're connected to Spanner 7 and Arc 7, and that connects to the Adashi 7 temple. But how all that might connect to whatever, I have no idea. By the end of this evening, we'll see where they're connected directly to the Anshatesa passage, and we'll find out where Peru fits into this too. And this was some of the new material right before. It was like the final graph I had to finish, and it's I don't know if you got that. Did they get that handout yet? Yeah, that final handout. It actually shows you where those places fit in the larger picture. It has to do with Sirius B as well, and the Adashi, or return temples, that are there, thanks to the Gyrodome. But we're back here on Earth, and we've got the beginnings of the aquifer seals opening. And we're going to go through the aqualene sun activations that are they're going to start opening the 12, 13, 14, and 15 layers, or activating the layers of the Rachulet bodies, and also the bands. And there's a particular sequence to this that I have a feeling we're going to do in Peru, because that was coming through over on this tablet, and the other stuff was coming through over on this tablet. I was having one of those days where I have to use 2 or 3 tablets, because I get 2 or 3 lines all at the same time of data flow. And you have to catch them as they come, because they don't all come one and then the other one talks. No, they come piece here and a piece here, piece here, piece here. It's really interesting. That's why I look like probably a dish rag this evening, because it's a bit draining. So this is still the D2 level of the Earth. We've got our seals. The seals are on their way of being open once the cores are open, and the work that we're doing with the tribes classes as we're activating rings is progressively triggering the activation of the seals. The seals correspond with the spans, actually. They end up in between the rings, so they would be span seals. So when we're activating the spans or the bands, it progressively activates those. There's a whole set of sequences of things that have to do with what activates what. As far as if you want to activate, say, these levels in here, what's the fastest way to do it? There's a whole set of things. There's what triggers what, triggers what, triggers what, in relation to the 15 spans and the 15 rings. And that we only have part of those charts done. That's another level of that detail, like having to know every quantum that every little tiny thing had and what spark it made and all of that stuff. Some of the work, when it comes through, is just brutal in the detail level, where there's never even time to get the graphs done, because to explain 3 steps that took 4 seconds or a millisecond, it takes 25 graphs to explain everything with the quantum things and all that. And these are another thing like that, like trying to trace all of this, how they interact with each other and what each band is composed of as far as what type of energy. All that's there. It's all technicals. And I figure at this point they can keep those books up there. And we can go there to the Adashi temples and read them for anybody who'd really like to. Because right now, the main thing is, I'd like to say getting out of here, but it doesn't look like that's the immediate thing on the beloved's mind. Because if we get out of here, so does the indigo host shield. That is what's going to allow for the Earth to have a respirator prana exchange cycle that will allow for the ancestral passage to open and give the place anywhere between 500 and 1,000 years where there is still a path of ascension out for other life forms, and not just human life forms, but all sorts of others, ones that are in some of the other kingdoms as well, some of the ones that are in the atmic levels, the cloud civilizations that are considered the mental body. They're really there. They're a different type of matter. They're atmic matter, or what we're seeing is telluric matter. So there's a lot more people here and life fields here than most people realize, because we don't see them with the apparatus we usually use for perceiving. That may be changing soon. So what we are going to, the first part was opening the aquifers. Now here, I also began to show the nets, but I had to really go through the embedded grids that show the D2 and the D3 one together to find the exact placement. These were roughs, and that's why I didn't release it. Well, I still haven't released any of these, but at least I've released an accurate vertical map that you have, that last page you got. It shows you where precisely the bands are. I had to figure out where precisely they were. And the analysis on these, when you have all of these embedded together, is enough to make you cross-eyed, especially when they're all hand-done and not pretty nice straight computer lines for circles that are, nice and clean. No, they're like this. So it's been a bit of a project. But I won't talk about the nets yet. These, when you see these scratchy lines on the diagrams here, they're referring to those, but there's more nets than this. This one is accurate, I know that, where it's showing this is the Ka-9 layer of the D2 Earth, and that means it's the upper mantle. And there's the crust, bless you, and this is the Ra-10 field, which is the light field, and our atmosphere actually all the way up to the thermosphere. Well, the first band, the Dermanet, and it's actually the D1 etheric atomic net, actually runs here. It runs through, it's anchored in our crust. It's actually anchored in the Earth crust as far as its center point and where its crystal implants are that allow for that net to form. They're right in the Earth's crust, so it's literally running beneath our feet all the time. And it generates a field that goes about halfway up to the ozone layer. It forms the ozone layer up there, and down here into the upper mantle, it goes down part of the way. And it creates like a tube, a scalar wave tube. These are scalar wave technologies, by the way. They're advanced scalar wave technologies. And they are meant to cause harm, and they do a very good job of it. This was the net called the derma net that affects the etheric atomic level, which means when we talk about DNA template, there's a distinction between the DNA template, the DNA, and the DNA overlay. All right, when we talk about DNA template, we are referring to the D1 sheath, which is the D1 etheric atomic layer. So the D1 net, etheric atomic net, is the one that harnesses and changes the natural coding in the DNA template. When we get into the D2 net, that is called the intranet. And I don't know if I have that on here. I don't think I have that on this one. The D2 net corresponds to the chemical DNA that science is looking at, which is, we call it the bionet, because it's the stuff you're seeing biologically. It's also the emotional net, because it's harnessing the what we experience as the emotional body, as emotions within our body, all come through on the D2 telluric level, and that is the telluric net. And that's the intranet, and that's in a certain place that we'll see. And then there's the D3 net. That corresponds, we call that the ego net, the epigenetic overlay net. It corresponds to what we call DNA overlays. When we've talked about overlays all these years, what we were talking about was the epigenetic chemical overlay that science is now talking about being the thing that actually controls the chemical DNA. And there's a whole big excitement in the scientific communities about looking into the fact that the epigenetics might be more important than even genetics, and like the understanding genetics doesn't end with the Human Genome Project and that kind of thing, that it not even begins there, really. So we've been talking about these things all along. We use the word overlay and for referring to that part of the sheath. That would be the D3 sheath, and it has to do with the atomic matter levels. There is a D3 net that corresponds to a certain levels in certain levels in our atmosphere that is controlling the mental body and is controlling the epigenetic overlay. It actually gives us, our egos, our epigenetic overlay net and harness. And this is where we get all sorts of weird things fed to us, as far as like programs you don't get to actually watch. You just kind of live them, having your emotional buttons pushed from the mental body level, where somebody will think for you if you give them a chance to, that kind of thing. There are mass programs put out through these net fields to move large groups of people in one way or another. There are also smaller ones, particularly where indigos are concerned, because indigos are the one big nuisance to the fallen angelics on the planet, because we keep bugging them. We keep doing stuff to undo what they did. We keep talking about what they did, which makes other people nervous, and they might start listening. So there are times when the drama is in D4 level and in the hibernation zones that are much closer than D4, when they start heating up, where they're trying to do something bad, and we're doing energetic work crystically that's getting in their way, where they'll come after you personally with the net too, because we're all wired into the net at this point. So as we work with these aqualene sun technologies, we're beginning to dissolve the net first within our bodies. Now this is good, because it will assist us first in making biological changes. First, I don't know which level of the bodies they will go through first, but before this planet has to worry about its nets coming down, and who knows what that might look like, first it will just be in the indigo shield. And I have a feeling that means we're going to start at some point doing the carbon to silica transmutation. At some point, it would mean that. I don't know when. I don't know what that will look like or feel like. What happens when your carbon atoms are spontaneously turning to silica inside your body? Is this quick? Is it slow? Is it painful? Do you have to just do it like pulling a Band-Aid off? I mean, how does it happen? I don't know the answers to these questions. However, I figure, well, if we get that far and we get to find out, I don't care what it feels like, because it means you can go with your body too. Excuse me. So the indigo shield will be, I won't say cosmic guinea pig, because it's not a guinea pig situation. They already know what these processes are. They've been around for billions of years. They're the Christic processes. They were the processes of the beginning, the Rachalet body activations. They're normal activations under normal circumstances. We're not in normal circumstances on this planet, but our bodies are still capable of doing these. And with all of the activations that that we've ever participated in with the beloveds, they I don't know what they do with it. There's something that's built into the Christic technologies that you can't overload yourself You could decide, oh, I've got to ascend tomorrow, and do all sorts of breathing stuff and do techniques and glue yourself to CDs and really overdose on it, and you'll just overdose your body to the point where it shuts down for a while in the DNA until the body can synthesize it. So they have a natural built-in protection. So you don't have to worry about spontaneously combusting because you activated your aqualene sun and your coronosphere too fast. Right? We won't have those kind of activations. And that's really good because there are some people that play with Kundalini activations out there, and they do have, you can have some really, really rough things happen where you end up having nervous breakdowns and ending up in mental hospitals temporarily because you had a break, because you just snapped. Because it does stuff, if you don't know what you're doing when you're working with Kundalini energies, which are the first 9-dimensional currents of the 15-dimensional current set of the outside currents that run through our systems, you can have some really bad physical experiences. They don't come with this type of work, with the Krystic work, because it's self-regulating, where when you're running anything on a D12 ray, it will automatically modulate to, if that's too much incoming, it will shut down the frequency and wait until, to bring more in until your body can hold it. And the same will apply with the aqualene sun frequencies and that kind of stuff. The only thing our bodies, from what I've seen in my experience with it, that our bodies have a bit of problem with is when we have all sorts of wacky pulses running in the grids from various different parts of either the threshold machine or the time rips or whoever's throwing chaotic frequency. I've felt those running through the grids on occasion, and it's like this wave of vibration will come up through your body spontaneously. It can even make your teeth chatter. I mean, it's like, oh my God, what is that? There's a few times when they were activating the Spirit Destiny grids way back in 2003, I believe, when the Wisadrak started activating them in relation to counteract the blue fire sword ones from the Anunnaki. Those were really nasty ones, the ones coming from Wisadrak. They were the strangest I'd ever felt, and they literally a couple times came through where I felt like my bones and my teeth were chattering, and it could literally rattle me apart. It was that strong. So those kind of activations, when you get that type of stuff, it usually indicates not so much that you're on overload of working with Krystic frequencies, but that you're picking up something else that's flying through the grids or through one of the nets, and it's affecting you biologically. As we work with the aqualene sun, it will progressively help our bodies to transmute that stuff when it comes in. It will escalate our transmutation ability. All right, so we have the D1 net running through this area, running through the crust beneath our feet. I'm going to put the next one on, and I'll go into the ones that have more layers, rings, whatever they are. All right. This is just showing you without the earth parts on it yet, to remind you that you have now we have the D3 one that's the same size as the D2 one was that we were looking at, but we shrunk the D2 one down and put it with its Rachalet body and its 15 structure here. And then we have the D3 one with its Rachalet body and its 15 structure. This goes up to 12, and then you have 13, 14, and 15. So the 15th layer, whatever, of the Rachalet body is of the D3 Rachalet body is out here. This begins to show you the overlaps where just between D2 and D3, where you have overlaps in the Jaleesic layers and such, fields, layers, shields, all those things, where you start to have correspondences like this down here. I'm going to do a big chart on this eventually. Can you pull this up, Anita, so I can show them this? There wasn't any time to write this out or type it out. And this is just the beginning of doing this, where you have, okay, the D3 Ma 8 level, right, equals, going smaller, D2 Ra 10 equals D1 12, which is whatever 12 is called. I forget what 12 is called. Rasha La, probably La, right? So there's a whole set of correspondences. And then these, of course, go over from D3, Ka 9 equals density level Ta 7. Now, of course, you could put more here. Density level was equivalent to Eartha D1, right? So then you could do the next one, Eartha D2, Eartha D3, Eartha density equals Cirrus B, D1, Cirrus B, D2, physical layer. So there's a whole way to take this over where you could find, if you're looking at this layer, it's this, but it's also whatever it corresponds to going across. You have that running through it too. And this is where you can find out where physical biomes or the physical planes are in relation to your physical plane. And it's kind of, I'm looking forward to doing this because I'm really excited now. And it just came through right before, it's like right on the last graph of the Sirius B connection. Because I've always had an affection for the Maharaji and all those guys that came from there. And, we're what, on our way home? We'll be able to sing our way home. Yes. Oh, yeah. Yeah. They got little pieces of that too, by the way, but it's not done yet. It wasn't meant to be done yet. But there's a fascinating thing, and I think I'm supposed to talk about this when we get to it later, where we're talking about the prana exchange, and we talk about the Oriya, with an O, not an A, tones, the 15 Oriya tones that correspond to the 15 bands and spans. And there will be songs that go with that, but I'll get into that when we get into that process. Yeah, and I'm sorry for keeping you up late, by the way. I don't mean to do that, but it's keeping me up late too. So, so I do apologize. I've seen a few people yawn, and I do understand. Believe me, I do. But hopefully, you'll feel that the information that you're receiving is worth it, as well as the activations that we're going to get at the end of this tonight. So, thank you. I guess they're okay with that, guys. Cool. So eventually we'll have a chart that shows all of those things. And then we can find, because remember, any one of these 15 scales, right, can be broken down into 1, 2, and 3 will be the solid core. 4, 5, and 6 will be the liquid outer core. The 7, 8, and 9 levels will be the mantle. And the 7, 8, and 9, 10, 11, and 12 levels will be the atmosphere, and 13, 14, and 15 will be the coronosphere. So you can see where all the things, where the mantles run, in relation to aquifers, in relation to each of the different places. So it's literally a map to the planes of life fields that exist here. All right, next one, please. On to more complicated ones, oh boy. This is to remind you, now we're showing the D3 set and the D2 set. All right, but I don't have the doubles here as far as the double sets of 15 because it gets really convoluted. So I just left the D3 set on where these, I believe, these rings go with the D3 grid. All right, but it's showing from the D2 grid where the surface of D2 Earth is. All right, this is where we start to be able to understand where things are in relation to each other. Now here, the Ra-Ka level, you have Ka 9 and Ra 10, so that's 9.5, the Ra-Ka level. The Ra-Ka level will always be the crust. All right, now you're on the D3 grid here, so you've got Ra-Ka crust, that's where the surface, that's where the thing, you have trees and those things growing out of it, and that's where you have the Ra light field that is the inner atmosphere. Down here, what is on the D3 grid, the Mata layer, where you have Ta 7 and Ma 8, so this would be 7.5 layer. It's 7.5 Mata on the D3 layer, but it is the Raka layer of the D2 grid. And that's why you've got the D2 Earth, the physical that we're seeing there. So there's this whole interrelationship, and I just wanted to show you that, even the words change. There's going to be a time when we can start to sing the grids, where once you see what ones are actually, you have to have the alignments perfect to get those tones to do that. But there will be whole songs to sing to activate certain parts of the grids or to communicate with certain types of elemental force that exist within those grids, even naturally. There will be ways at some point where we can use those tones and things to have conversations with the fairies that have to do with the etheric atomic D1 levels. You have the little fairies and you have the big fairies that have to do with Earth's D1 levels. So there's a higher, larger elemental kingdom, or the invisible, etheric atomic ones that they actually can be visible under certain circumstances, and we have them down in Earth, and we also have them up in Eartha, which means flying around in our atmosphere. I have a feeling some of those things they call rods, and they're getting pictures of interesting, strange things flying through the air in the UFO movement, and they don't know what they are, but they appear to be alive, and they fly through the air, and they're sort of reminiscent of things you might see deep under the ocean, and those strange creatures that swim. Well, these guys swim through the air. What do you want to bet? They're swimming through the aquifers. It's not air to them. It just looks like air to us. So, we're starting to see evidence of the interface of these different planes already. And there's so much that can be gained from understanding these maps and getting them down finally, where we have all of the relationships going all the way across, where we know what equals what equals what equals what. And so when we start having phenomena that we're experiencing, we can have an idea of where the phenomena is coming from. So it won't be such a mystery anymore. We've got rods. What are rods? Who knows? But they're flying in the air, right? I mean, people set up video cameras on like high-speed bits for long periods of time to be able to catch these things, and they have to like angle it to the sunlight just the right way to get to actually be able to see them. But they're getting some pretty interesting photographs of them, and they're just one type of thing like that. There's also ones that exist. There's things that I'd like to find out what they are. I'm not sure what they are, but I've seen them for years to the point where I talk to them, and they're quite friendly actually. I don't know if you ever saw the Star Trek first generation movies that had the one show about the Trebles. They were little fuzzy cooey things that didn't have faces. They were just like balls of living fur that cooed and replicated and replicated and replicated and replicated, right? And they were very sweet. Well, there is something in the energy kingdoms that hang around right here at the surface that you can see them sometimes. I mean, I can almost see them 3D sometimes. They look treble-like, but they're made of energy. They're not telluric like this energy. They're more etheric. They must be etheric atomic. But they scramble around and they squeak and do things like if you happen to move too fast and one happens to be by, you'll actually hear but inside like oh, that kind of thing. They're very sweet, and I think they're part of the Earth's etheric atomic. Either that or they're part of the etheric atomic from up there. I don't know. They might be. Maybe they're. Well, they look about this big here. Maybe they're microbes up there. I don't know. Right? Who knows? Scary thought when you think of dust mites. All right. Do you ever see pictures of dust mites or flies or any of those little tiny things that's so nice that they're tiny so you really can't see the detail? Right? Because if you did, you'd feel like monsters were invading the planet. Right? I don't think they have what we call bugs in Christic zones, actually. Right? We may have them in the Aurora zone because it's part of this imprint and still carbon-based. But I have a feeling that fully Christic zones are fully silica-based, and they don't have any carbon-based things. And I think most what we call bugs, particularly the kind that bite and do nasty things like bite you and liquefy whatever's inside and pull it out like spiders do, and there's a whole bunch of things that bugs do that if they were bigger, we'd really have an issue with co-sharing a planet with them. But because we're the bigger ones, we could just suffer our little bites here and there and moan about it, but not be terrified and bringing out the atomic weapons to try to fry the massive bugs that are coming down over the mountain. Oh, I hope we don't have any of those from the hibernation zones. What does live in a hibernation zone? That's a very good question. They tend to be the upper fields where we're squashed into the lower ones. This probably means whatever is there is bigger. Not as big as the ones from Eartha, but bigger than we are. Oh, dear. I've seen the fly-in shadow mosquito things that try to help with body snatches. I've seen those. Yeah, we had to fight those off when we were trying to help our kitty do Bardo. So there's some strange things, and if you start experiencing strange things, know it has to do with the fact that it's because of what is taking place on the sun that there is an early activation happening that's going to progressively help the nets come down, and it's starting with the indigo shield. So it's great, we all get to go nuts first. We get to be the ones to see the stuff that's strange. Because we're activating first, our nets will be coming down first. But we also will get more aware. We have the guidance we need. Because the more the nets come down in our own fields, in our own biologies, the more we will have a stronger and clearer line with the beloved, so you can start meeting your family from up there and working to, it's just a whole other level. Imagine if you got to go up there and all of a sudden your body went boink and came with you and you found yourself fully standing there. It'd just be awesome. It's talk about cathartic. It would just blow your mind. Would you laugh, cry, scream, jump up and down? I'd be speechless if it happened, that quick. And sometimes, for some people, that's how it will be. We're about to enter an amazing journey. And they wouldn't be giving us maps this detailed if they weren't planning on bringing us through. And, I know that. And they wouldn't be doing it 500 years early either. Right? Yeah. So, back to the maps. These are the circular maps, I like to call them, and they are the maps of the Roche-Chalet bodies. This shows you, again, Earth D2 crust. This would be the D3 crust, which means the atomic crust. All right, so this is the telluric atomic crust. This is the atomic atomic crust. That's usually associated with D3, which is associated with the mental body levels, because it appears that form to us when our consciousness is actually stationed in this area in order to see this area as solid. And when you're in a three-dimensional system, a three-dimensional hologram program, they're always built on, the natural structure is the four things: the density level, the D3, the D2, and the D1 level, and those breakdowns of matter, where you have a telluric set that will be perceived as solid while part of the consciousness is stationed here. So we have part of our consciousness in this layer. Right now, this layer has actually been polarized, so we have like a lower mental body and a higher mental body, and this is where higher does not always necessarily mean better, because the higher mental body is actually what's in the hibernation zone. So we have part of our consciousness field stuck there. This will be healing. These hibernation zones, a part of ourselves are stuck in, which means there's part of our consciousness that we're not able, like thought forms of ourselves, that actually other things can try to run around it. This is why you can't always trust. If somebody comes to you, say, in dream state, and I've had people, especially in the beginning before I put out the warning on it, said, "Oh, you came to me in a dream last night." And I'd check their rosters, and I said, "No, I didn't." Somebody, and sometimes I do. Sometimes I visit, but I usually, bless you, sometimes I leave it in a way where it's known. I won't come like looking like me, because other things can use your image. And it doesn't matter if you're a ascended master of whatever kind. Yes, they can use your image. If you can hold an image that you think is a safe image to hold of somebody you want to contact, and you have that as a special thing that you think is just hidden in your mind, if part of your mind is plugged into these nets, it means they can read that. They can use whatever image. They can use father, grandmother, whoever passed on. They can use all sorts of images. If you're open to astral projection, they can send anybody's face visiting you. So these areas, this is why it's been so hard to keep a clear line for people to communicate. This is why channels get all jumbled up into what kind of communications they have, and most of them are being very good channels for the hibernation zones or related, affiliated FA races. So we're going to be able to progressively, with the aqualene sun activations, begin the process of depolarizing that part of our own consciousness and transmuting as we depolarize. Because what you don't want to do is just depolarize it and let it come in, flood in, right? It's depolarizing and transmuting any part of the reversed energy that isn't your own and putting your own back on its right spin. So in terms of our personal Roche-Chalet, that is what they're going to be doing as we release the nets progressively on a BPR, or base pulse rhythm. It works with your own individual body-based pulse rhythm. So it'll be a different speed for everybody within a parameter. Right? I mean, I'm sure by 2012 they'll want us to be at a certain level of this altogether, because there are other things happening at 2012 that are escalations. But in the meantime, we are going to begin the process of recreating mental body layers, which are atomic layers, and the fields that go here. Now, these are in this field in relation to Earth, surface Earth, as we know at D2. These would be, they're kind of like replica mental body planes, but there's much more up there than just what we see here. There's all sorts. They seem much bigger. Well, they're in a larger span as far as the size of the sphere that they're taking place within. It's quite a bit larger than the sphere that these are taking place within. So there are much broader fields of experience and perception and projection in those areas. Now, if we look, where is that mental body plane in relation to our D2 Earth? We know where Earth's crust is, but how far up that is, how can we tell? We can tell because the beloved showed us where in the Roche-Chalet maps the Van Allen belts exist. And science already knows approximately how many miles up the Van Allen belts are. So they're a very good marker for determining where these layers that go out from here, which is also determining where eventually Eartha is going out from there. So the inner Van Allen belt, and I have to look for, I've had various conflicting ones on how many miles, and sometimes they're kilometers, and half of them are in miles, and I don't know my conversion, so it'll take me a while to research how many miles on all of these. But we have the inner Van Allen belt. So this would be the innermost point of the inner belt, and this would be the outermost point of the outer belt, right? Then there's a gap zone in between them, and science talks about that. And every once in a while, something funny happens in there. That I've read that someplace, that there's like activity there that they're assuming comes from something, I forget what, but it's not coming from that. It has to do with certain fields activating. And I have a feeling there's going to be more activity taking place in here, in between the Van Allen belts, which they call the gap zone. Now, the outer Van Allen belt is here, and it spans these layers. Now, this is considered the outer atmosphere. It's part of the D3 Rosh Hashanah body of Earth, but it's considered Earth's D3 outer atmosphere. It still manifests itself as portions of our atmosphere. What we see right now there is, in this part of it, we have the outer Van Allen. This is where, in the outer Van Allen area, that the D3 level epinet, or the ego epinet, runs, the one that controls the epigenetic overlays in our bodies. And then over here, we have where I believe the D2 net runs in this vicinity. I have to look at the other map, it's more clear. And then the D1 one runs right through the Earth's crust. Right? So from these you can determine where the nets are, where the control fields are, and if you can determine where the nets are, you start to see where hibernation zones are. And they're literally places that are put on opposite rotational spin to what is natural, angular rotation of particle spin. It's reversed to the point where they become invisible to us and we become invisible to them, except they know we're here because the ones who live in those zones created that condition by creating the nets. So they're the controllers. They're the invisible world management team, actually. And they have their ground crew and the Illuminati races that work various agendas here. And they've been here for quite a while. The hibernation zones themselves were created in 9562 BC. But before that, there were two zones that had started to be created. And this is where we had the Atlantean and the Lemurian holocausts. There was something called time warp zones created then, and that was before the full hibernation zone thing was created. So we'll see a little bit of where that fits into these maps in a little bit. Excuse me. Next one, please. Okay. Now we're getting to, and see, before I release any of these for publication, I want to make sure I've got my bands right, or my layers right, because when you're doing this, and these were all done quickly, because it was, again, crash course for one of the tribes classes, there wasn't any time to go back and double-check myself or anything. That's why I'm not letting these guys loose, because the ones that I just finished today are the accurate ones. They may differ a little bit from here, but it still gives you the exact same idea, where you have D2 surface Earth here, which is the rock layer of the D2 Rosh Hashanah body. You have the D3 rock layer, which is the mental body surface. And, of course, there would be mental planes going all the way down into core, just like there are physical planes going all the way down into core. It's not showing the D1 layer here on this one. It would just make it too convoluted where you can't read it. Going upward, we end up where, if you keep drawing Cathar grids, right, where they're lined up in a way where the top point would be in the Rajna lock of the next larger one up, and the bottom point would be in the Iyumbi lock on the next one up. You could get the size of the next Cathar grid expansion, so you can see where your 15 layers would go and where they would interrelate. At some point, I'd love to put like the bunch of them together all the way up to D2 Cirrus B. But I think I'll need an awfully big piece of paper and definitely a computer to have the circles really, really clear, where you're using fine lines and you can really see between them. Because I just can't do it by hand. It gets too sketchy, especially when you photocopy it on the little portable we've got. So anyway, it will give you the idea of how the maps form and the fact that there are all these layers. And I'll just call them layers, but layers mean rings, mean fields, right? Right. All the way interwoven up until we get to, once you analyze all those things, and these things were analyzed to get that. I didn't draw them because I would have needed huge paper in order to keep going, but I was able to, once they gave me the conversion charts, where I could see the, D3 this equals D2 that equals density level that equals, right? Where we didn't finish the whole charts yet, but we got enough where we could find the layers of where Eartha D2 mantle is. Because this is where we're aiming. The mantle layers, which are the Ma 8 layers, the middle mantles of any of the layers, of any of the grids, the D1, D2, D3, the density level, all of those have a characteristic of having what are called middle mantle biomes. All right, so they will all have a biome. And the Eartha D2 level biomes are the Adashi temples that we are projecting to. They are physical. All right, when we get to the point where we can shift into the Eartha zone, we will experience them as physical. Right now, we're beginning to experience them as gliders. And the next will be as sliders, where there will be a version or a link to those. Once the aurora field is fully activated, there will be a link to them where we can begin to experience the aurora zone and the, let's say, almost like the basement. It would be like a basement version of these temples coming down into the aurora field where our biologies can reach them, where it's still a combination of carbon and silica base, so we don't fry going through a gate that's only for silica-based beings kind of thing, right? So there's going to be an aurora zone. I'll show you where that activates in a little bit. And that will give us a link to have more and more physical type experiences from the Adashi temples, but also the people we are beginning to meet right now in these journeys in the Adashi temples. These aren't imaginary friends. These are real beings up there that have really, there's a big difference. Yeah. These are people that work in service all of time. They not because they have to, because it's what they love, because they love the Krist, they love creation, and just like people have different jobs down here just because they really like to do that, the ones that are working as the greeters and advisors in the Adashi temples are very well trained in what they do, and they adopted that training not because they needed to earn money, but because they really loved doing it, and they love the people they're assisting, and they have such a love for races that is so unconditional. It doesn't matter what you did in 20 other lifetimes, no matter how bad or awful you were. If you're really sincere and you want to hold a Krist contract, they would do the best they could for you to assist you to your next highest level of evolution in the Krist, without judging you, without hating you or thinking, oh, isn't that terrible? You don't have to be embarrassed, that kind of stuff with these guys, right? And they do it because they love it. You are meeting people right now, and you're meeting them in a different state, all right, a different state of perception. These people, once the aurora zone is activated, will be able to come into the aurora zones just like we will as our bodies activate a bit more with the aqualene sun, be able to go into the slide zones. So we will be able to at some point physically meet, which will be really, really neat. That will be the first level of encounter, where we go from being gliders, where we're just visiting in projection, to being sliders, where we get to go and visit them in those spaces. And we won't be leaving planet, because this is all, Earth is here, Earth is there. We're still on the same planet. But it will be otherworldly when we do that. We'll feel otherworldly. It will be as if you slid into a whole different place that feels a whole lot nicer. There will be healing technologies that they bring to us there, some of which we will be able to bring back on this side. At some point, I wouldn't doubt if whatever's going up on this side slides into that zone. And then the rest just kind of slides out of our perception. I'm not sure how that's going to work, but the slide zones and being able to slide is the first thing that they will teach us after we learn to glide. And we have to learn to glide because we're picking up the different activations in our Raschale body by doing these journeys that will allow us to begin the biological transmutation that will allow enough of the carbon to be transmuted and enough changes to happen in the DNA where we can actually do a bioslide. So it's exciting what we're moving into. Boy, 6 years ago, I had no clue about what I was going to be teaching. Not here, anyway. Up there I must have, but boy. I'm very grateful for it because it's really exciting. I have met other people physically in this life. And the person who was the walkout of this body, because I am a walk-in, for those of you who don't know, I've explained that for ages and ages now. It's a natural indigo walk-in. It was not a snatch-in. Right? One of those. Right? It was full soul agreement, and boy, she wanted out by the age of 12, and we couldn't get in fast enough, and she wasn't happy, but she stayed till 33, and then said, that's it, you take it now, or I'm gone. So anyway, that's another tangent. I won't go there. Anyway, yeah, all right, I'll get on to the next one. I'm going to get on to the next one. They want me to get on to these. I'm getting like... What's nice, though, once the doors to the temple are opened, it's funny because I am never alone now. You can be alone or one. You just kind of put a bubble screen up and everybody will leave you alone, mind your own business. I always do that if I'm in the shower or anything like that. Do my deflection screen. But there's a feeling of just always having a buddy or a group of buddies with you. And it's really neat. I'm used to this as far as the beloveds have been with me for a long time. That's how the work got here. That's how the books get here. But sometimes it's very formal. And at different times, they would feel so far away, and the line would be very hard to keep it, to hold because of what was happening in the grids. But this is funny. This is like having, a buddy with you. And it has something to do with, I think, a place called our mentor space. That, as you'll see toward the end of these diagrams, there was something really funny that they showed me about the Rachalet body. And I kind of went, oh, that's the mentor space. And this has something to do with the buddy feeling. That there's, I think, a part of ourselves that are directly connected to the Adashis as well, particularly the people of the Aquafarian indigo descent or Aquafarian human descent. I do believe we might just have incarnations there as well, and maybe that's how we got down here. I think there was a lot of us that didn't birth in other ways. We birthed in through Eartha. And that means we would have a self back there because we wouldn't be able to bring all of that consciousness into a carbon-based biology down here. So once you begin playing with the journeys, you went on one journey. That's just a beginning. That was an access key journey that was meant to get the codes open in your Rachalet so you would have access. You can go back. You can take an image of when you first arrived in there and try to remember what it felt like. Or try to go back, and if it was just fuzzy and I'm not quite even almost there, what did it say? You can go back in until you get a strong enough imprint of it. And you can take it from there. And I go in all the time and just like sit, and I'll find myself absolutely alone in this huge space with the lovely light coming up through the floor. And it's like dimly lit, the one I keep going to. I keep going to the D2 one for some reason. And that has like a pale peachy silver light coming through the selenite crystal floor. But I will just go there, particularly when I feel exhausted or like really grouchy or things are just really getting to me or whatever. I will just go there and just kind of... And it's like, I remember at one point, I was there for a while, and it gets more real every time you go. I mean, you really feel that you're there. You can even get, it's really strange where you can feel frequencies that you start to pick up there in your Rachalet body. You can feel them moving into your physical body from there, and they're very healing. I've been taken a couple times when I went up there having just my own little hissy fit temper tantrum to myself, not to anybody, because I'll block that. I won't bother them with that when I'm having I can't stand this anymore. Right? Because sometimes with the transmissions, it makes me feel really sick bringing them through. And I get really tired of not feeling well, where I have to go into Saudi like every half paragraph and that kind of thing. So I have little things that I have my issues with. And I've gone up there and just kind of like sat, and I find myself just kind of like plopping down. And I always seem to end up in just like a roby thing. It reminds me of like just a bathrobe. And I don't know where that is because I don't do it on purpose. It like happens in the transition. I don't know why. As I'm going up, it's like, oh, there's that again. But they'll leave you alone if you want to be alone. You can go there. They said it's used a lot. Those places in the Adashi temples are used by all sorts of beings as like a sanctuary. Like some people would use a church or a mosque or whatever their religion is. They would go there and simply just to be and to feel closer to the presence of God's source and that kind of thing. And there's something the way the fields work there, where even if they said this, even if you had 1 million people in this space that looks very large, but for 1 million people it would appear to be very crowded. It's not that large when you're looking at it visually. There's something in frequency where you actually go in and you have some kind of your own hologram protection thing where you don't see the other people and they don't see you. You can actually move through each other and walk through each other, so there's never overcrowded. And I don't know how they do that yet. I'm not sure how that works, but that is one of the characteristics in the Adashi temples. So right now, you've already gone on one journey. It means you can go anytime you want to. It means you can go, and the best thing to do is to look for your advisor, or if you didn't hook up with them during the thing, because some people once in a while, say, nobody came. Right? And it isn't that they didn't come, it's that something was blocking the connection that you were trying to make, because they all do show up when they're asked to. But you can ask for your greeter advisor person to come. And they're not advisors that are there to tell you what to do. They're there that if you have any questions, or if you'd like, if you need some help with something, that they would give you their opinion on how you might be able to solve something or something. They can take you to healing chambers. They've taken me to various ones that actually made my body feel better, where I could hold the line better. Where I did, because I was getting nauseous from it, and I was getting hot flashes, cold flashes, nauseous, cramping, the whole bit. Sometimes when the line comes through, we're doing 3 Akasha levels now, plus 2 hubs. I don't think my little body was made for that, actually. Not quite that much amping. So they've taken me places. They will take you places, too, now that you've got there. But you have to take the initiative. They're not going to come like, roaring down the tunnel saying, yo, when you coming? Dinner's ready, that kind of thing. If you want to go, you need to take the initiative, but you need to know you're welcome. And simply remember the strongest image you had going up there. Start there and project up from it. And just think, I'm going into this temple space. There was a clear description of what the greeting room looked like. Don't worry about what the roadmap was. You've already done it once. You've got the mathematical coding. That's why they wanted you to run the wave, and they wanted it from the first time it was run. That's why it had to be on the CD, where we couldn't even do it live again from a transcript. It had to be run on the CD from the moment in time, where it was recorded from the moment in time that those things opened. So now at this point, you all can go. So anyway, back to technicals. But I wanted to let you know that. You can take the initiative and realize you have just got your wings as a glider. Okay? So you really can go out and go up there and communicate with the people who are there. And yes, they're really people. Next one. Thank you, darling. Uh-oh. Yeah, here's where it starts to get a little hairy. All right. This is one of the ones you didn't get, because these do not photocopy where you can read anything on them. They're brutal. These all have to be redone, but at least they were enough where I could pull the information from them, where I could see and look at them with microvision and count how many circles out and what it says in that little thing, and use literally use a magnifying glass. So what this is showing a lot of information in one place. Again, it's showing you where the Adashi temples are in the Ma 8 D2 Eartha Ma 8 middle mantle layer. And it's also beginning to show where doors are. Because there are certain places where you have etheric doors, certain places where you have atomic doors, which would be corresponding to the D3 levels, and there are certain places where you have actually physical doorways that go through to certain layers. Now, from these messy-looking things that the vertical maps were pulled, and they were pretty messy-looking, too, when we first started with him. These also show the different bands, and I won't try to explain it on this. I've made a simpler one of these that shows specifically where the bands are, and then I've done it vertical so you can see exactly where the net bands are running and that kind of stuff. But all of those vertical ones were like taking a pie section from here, or a slice, where you could see going up what each level was about. So you can see which level the nets are coming in on, which level the aurora zones are coming in on. This one here, in its monkey little thingies, you can see there are these little platforms that show, and I can't even read the writing on this one, it's so messy. I wanted to show you where they kind of started, right? They start messy and then they become more civilized from there. But there are 4 aurora platforms that run in and around the seals. We talked about the 7 seals that go out, and then actually 2 more going up into the Eartha domains. But there are 4 aurora platforms here. I won't show them to you on this one. I just wanted to show you where these start. I will get the cleaner ones where they're easier to see, so you can see what that is actually trying to show you. Where are we here? Where is he? We showed these. Oh, he's over there. Okay. Trying to see. Is this the one that was next? Do I need that one on? I'm going to put that one here. I'm going to put this one on next. Yeah, that's the one. However it goes. Am I backwards? Here we go again. Yep. Alrighty. Now, at least this is a little better. It's really funny because this one looked really clean on the paper, but that they're not reproduced in that way on the machine. Because we have a small machine that we use, so we can have it in the room that we make copies on. It's just a little guy, and it kills type. For example, you just can't read it; it turns into blobs. But at least it holds basic shapes. What we're looking at again is the D3 grid here, and this would be the D3, 13, 14, and 15 layers. And this is where you start to see where here, all right. This is the D3, 13, 14, and 15 layers, but it's also Eartha D2 physical surface Ra 10. So this is the Ra 10 field, so the crust is here. Right? This is Eartha's crust in relation to we down here, which would be the D2 Ra Ka crust layer. So we're down here, in between those two surfaces, we have the mental body surface as well. Now, normally this zone here would be this entire thing. This would be the Raka D3 atomic Raka level, which would be the surface or the mental body plane, and this would be its Ra field. All right. Now, if we bring this back over here, that means that tree would be this big, right? So if we were back over here where the net isn't, this would have a tree on it, the mental body plane tree, which means that's where the surface is, and it would be a tall tree that would take, it wouldn't take up the space, that's like the end, the outer atmosphere, but it would be larger shaped. What we have now is this field has been split by one of the nets. All right. So instead of having one tree that filled that space, or to indicate that that was the surface, the full the full space between objects on the surface of the D3 mental plane, which is the atomic. It's actually a physical plane of atomic matter. It is split now. So we've got up here this reverse spin zone that is called a hibernation zone. All right. The hibernation zones were created by creating the nets, which are, they form like literally tubular or they're spherical broadcasts. They actually run, if you think of actually tonal lines running down a sphere, they actually run the ley lines and the grid lines of the area they're connected to. Now this particular net is the D2 net, which was the intranet. This is the one that is blocking the mental body and splitting what would be the mental plane. It's splitting the mental plane. So we've got we got the higher mental plane that is actually a reverse spin hibernation zone. We got the lower mental plane that is what's left of what would be the natural mental plane. It's through the natural mental plane that the beloved step down their communications from Eartha to be able to reach us. All right. Now here we have something called A3. Now the A's refer to aurora platforms, which are spheres. They're spherical layers of proper spin, crystal-coded energy that allow for, from Eartha, that allow for safe zones where if you start to project, you can jump the zones so you can get up to the Adashi temples without getting ensnared in some of the reverse spin hibernation zones. Because the reverse spin hibernation zones, when you start to project, if you ask to project out into them long enough, you'll actually fully reverse the part of your body that's projecting, and when it comes back in, it will progressively reverse your DNA template codes. Yeah. That's why there's a lot of, also, one of the things that happens with hibernation zones a lot, and not just the mental one, that's the D3 level of the hibernation zone created by the D2 net. But there's another level, a D2 level, that is a physical hibernation zone. People experience from here, if you're stuck down here, you'll experience the encounters like as if they're astral or as if they're dream state. But there's a lot of people on this planet who have inadvertently adopted hibernation zone lovers, where they have experiences when they go to sleep at night or when they're just hanging out and, doing meditations. They will have certain ones approach them, and they might appear as Adonis, or they might appear as some wonderful, majestic figure that gives it a lie and say, I'll take you as my beloved wife. And they have they think are astral relationships with these people. They are not astral relationships, not that they would be any better under these circumstances. They're interacting with people from the hibernation zones. And what you pick up in the part of your consciousness and the part of your body that you sent into those encounters goes right into your physical body, right into your physical DNA. And you can, just like if you repeatedly, let's say, engage in activities here with someone who is fully reverse coded and they have a much stronger template than yours is, then you can actually have your template turned over by that. Now these are guys who are in the outer bands, the higher field, which means they have subharmonics that are higher than the ones that your DNA is functioning on right now. So people that, it's like popular in the New Age movement. There's one woman who goes around and speaks about how it's so much more fun to sleep with reptilians. She's workshops on it. And I'm thinking, nothing against reptiles, but she's like talking full on dinosaurs standing upright. All right. I met her once at a UFO conference, where I was a speaker and she was one of the other speakers. I can't believe this person. Hey, girl, better you than me. Whatever. But when they're dealing with these type of encounters, they are dealing with hibernation zone life life and visitors, because not everything in the hibernation zones came from here either. A lot of it are visitors from elsewhere, from other fallen angelic systems and that kind of thing. But the hibernation zones are quite well structured. The whole thing can be found on the maps of the D2 and the D3 level. Now, when we look here, if we look at what's called Derma Net 1, all right, that is the D1 net, which means it's made out of the D1 frequencies of the etheric atomic frequencies. This net is centered. Its crystal implant system is implanted right in our Ra-Ka level, which is between our upper mantle Ka and our Ra light field on D2. All right. What its presence does, by creating a band of artificial scalar frequency bouncing up and down and spiraling there, is it separates this plane here. This is our light field, our natural light field, all right, our Ra field, Ra 10. It splits the D2 Ra 10, and that's the D1 net, splits the D2 Ra 10. It creates a hibernation zone above it, and it creates a hibernation zone below it. Now, if this is Earth's crust, this implies that the net is running down, about halfway down our outer mantle, and below that there is a hibernation zone. So there is one below our feet. There is one also. Now this manifests itself. You see the boundary here where the derma net stops and the hibernation zone begins. That would be the ozone layer. All right. Normally, this would be our thermosphere here, and we would have our stratosphere and all that stuff here of our inner atmosphere. But where our ozone layer is where that net tube stops, where that net frequency stops, and it creates the reversal of this part up above the ozone layer, up to right before the Van Allen, inner Van Allen radiation belt. All right, so this is how you can tell up there by looking at where the Van Allens are in relation to where the nets are and the hibernation zones. You can tell mileage on these things. We just haven't had time to plug it in. So we've got a D1 derma net and a D2 split light field with a D2, actually no, they're considering this one the D1. All right, our D2 light field is split, but it creates what they're calling the D1 hibernation zone upper and D1 hibernation zone lower, which means it's in our D2 light field up here, but it's made of etheric atomic D1 matter base. All right, so these guys would appear like ghosties. This is where a lot of people, if they don't know how to bardo properly, get trapped, where their spirits get trapped. And there are ways, and there's a lot of helping committees. There's a lot of what we call way showers that are out there. Even some of them, there's way showers on planet that know they are. All right, like that used to be a job Katie used to do, where she'd have to say, call in her boss, say, I can't work today. I'm not going to tell you why, but she would have to literally go, and she would sit someplace, and she'd usually sit when she'd do it, and she'd project out, and she would have certain ones she had to take through certain ways. She knew how to get them out to the light, to the proper light, right, and that kind of thing. So there's a lot of teams like that. It's part of training, actually. It's part of Rachalet body training, and you may find that some of you have way shower contracts that assist first that way, because it helps to, if you're going to be a guide of people physically going out, you might get training first in how to get the ones who are dropping their body, where you learn to meet them where you need to, and how to get them through to the temples or to where they can next go, because not everybody can fully make it to an Adashi temple. So there's lots of things there's lots of jobs out there that we're going to learn about, like way showers, that teach you how to get past hibernation zones so you don't get stuck there, whether you're going with a body or through a natural bardo experience. They won't teach us the bardo bit for a while, though. So we got D1 net, splits the D2 light field, which means things are much smaller here than they normally would be. Things would grow larger here. We would have more of a light spectra here if part of it wasn't reversed and made invisible. This is still, what's invisible in there will be the etheric atomic level of these guys, even though it's running through a D2 light field. Now over here, up here, we have the D2 net. That's the intranet. And that's the one whose presence, this is where the net runs, and that runs all the way around there. This is where it splits what would be the D3 Ra light field, or the mental body plane. And it creates this part of it that's part in the net, it's netted, it's still on its natural spin, but it's cut in half, and it's still harnessed by the net. And then it has this upper part of itself here. And that is the D2, which means telluric, which means physical level. All right, hibernation zone, the upper D2 hibernation zone. That would be physical. And below this net, there is another D2 lower hibernation zone, which would also be physical. So you're talking about two physical planes that are up there in the atmosphere, right? And people live in them. And if we try to find where these might be, again, find the Van Allen belts. All right, we have the inner Van Allen belt running here. Now here is where we're looking for. So hibernation zone, the outer upper D2 hibernation zone, is in the gap between Van Allen 1 and Van Allen 2 over here. All right, so it's actually running the gap. Now we don't see it here because it's on opposite spin, opposite particle spin, at least so far. All right, now if we get down here on the bottom of the D2 net and see the lower D2 field, this is running actually through a little bit past the center of the inner Van Allen belt. So you can literally know where these places are up there. It's probably a good thing because I have a feeling we're going to have some interesting experiences with the people from these places as this drama progresses. So that's the D2 net, and that is the one that controls our telluric bodies, which means our chemical DNA. It controls literally the function of the chemical DNA and the body itself. And the body is what gives us the experience of emotion. All right, so it's the emotional body net. It's considered the bio-emo net. All right. Now, there's the other net, the big one, up here. This is the D3 ego epinet, or epigenetic overlay net. This is the one that controls the outer sheath on the DNA, chemical sheath, that actually tells the DNA below it what to do. And this D3 net runs in relation to, it's centered on, if we look at here, it's centered on, where does that center fall? Falls right in the center of the Van Allen belt. That net actually creates the Van Allen outer belt. All right. So we have that. It goes up, not all the way out, right? The Van Allen belt still comes to out here. So it goes partial way. If you go to the middle of the Van Allen belt and then out still a bit more, and that's where the net is running. The top part of it come down from its center line, and it runs here. So the whole thing is running in the outer Van Allen belt. Now right below it, you've got this band here up. Now this one is called the D3 lower mental, which means it's made of atomic matter. So we have atomic matter here, the D3 lower, and these all have names. And they have been playing games with us for a very long time, as you'll see with the names. Boy. Now, we go here and look at this, what's on top of that net, right? This line here. This is the D3 upper net zone. So this is D3 upper, and that is between, like, right toward the, past the middle of the Van Allen belt, then out to the end of the Van Allen outer belt, and then into it a little bit. All right, so that gives you where that is located. People live in all of these zones, and what's really funny is when you find out who and what is in there. Now, these are safe zones. All right, we have Aurora 4, Aurora 3, Aurora 2, and Aurora 1. There will be a time when with the full activation of the gyrodome where those aurora fields blend, and they form a sphere that runs through the spheres that will be the aurora slide zone, that will allow for krystic passage. It will allow things that have biology that still have carbon base in them to still come and interact with and heal much faster. Also heal what's needed to be healed in the biology in order to be able to either make it through ascension to elsewhere or ride starfire or decide they're going to come back on this planet and help for the next 500 to 1,000 years, depending on what they want to do. It will also become a habitation zone. The aurora zone is going to become the next place that the krystic races live. Before we can make it to Eartha, we need to be able to live in the aurora zone. And the aurora zone will still be here during and after starfire, 2047 to 2051. All All right? Because of the aurora zone, this Earth body won't fall apart during that period. The biggest thing that's affecting the system at this point, everything was going well with the host, actually. The host through with the from the Anastasia passage, all of that was all set up for 2047, 2051 starfire when Eartha actually blinks off. All right. So what's going to be left when Earth temporarily blinks off is going to be the aurora zone, which has part of the imprint and template of Eartha and part of its land configurations and part of those of Earth. And there will be a version of the Adashi temples there that link into the larger ones. Eartha will come back after it's finished with its starfire, but in the meantime, Eartha, the aurora zone was always the gyrodome plan. The gyrodome is the Aurora 4 field being activated to allow for this Krystic zone to be created on this planet. And that Krystic zone will have a link to the evac thing of the Anastasia passage, and it will sustain, it would have stayed, it could have sustained for another 3 billion years on the amount of spin that was still left in the seed atom, as far as quantum that was left between Earth and the Sun. But that has changed because of the compaction of the solar gates, where Earth has not had its gates compacted yet, but they're being literally pried open at this point and held open by the Anastasia passage, because they would normally follow the Sun. They would, if the gates compacted on the Sun, it would only be a very short matter of time. Within a couple of years, they said that the full planetary gates would do the same. So we would be stuck, in the same position, because once that happens, that is the bardo, the entering of bardo, of a stellar body, and it's when the prana seed compacts and separates from the seed atom behind it. And at that point, you can't open it back up again, and there is no ability to connect to backflow anymore, or the Antankarana cord that comes out as outflow. So the Sun has gone into this particular phase. It has put this solar system, as we know our solar system, it is now a bardo system, because its Sun its gates have compacted. They said in this case, because it's not a natural bardo, because it was forced by what the Buddhara did, the Borgia did with their triangulation pulse. They forced those gates closed. They were trying to force them here on Earth as well, to harness everybody in. Because of that, we have just 500 to 1,000 years left to hold the Anastasia passage before it goes into nova cycle. It wouldn't normally nova that quickly, but because of the damage that was done and the way it was done, because it was a forced thing that was done by hitting it with scalar technologies of huge magnitude, that there's a short period of time left compared to 3 billion years left to get the life fields out of here. Because at this point, you need to get the life fields out of here, or they're going to go space dust return. Because when a sun novas, that is space dust return, and anything near that sun in its solar system will also be fragmented into asteroids probably at that point, which is partial space dust return until something else makes them smaller, and eventually they do go back as space dust. So we are in a new condition on this planet. We are in a condition of, now we are fully in a bardo system, but we still have the respirator. And the respirator is the Anastasia passage that links this matrix through Eartha up into the aqueous matrix, the parallel adjacent Akasha, which is a fully Krystic hosting matrix. It needs to host there because Eartha alone couldn't do it, because Eartha is going to starfire, which means Eartha is going to blink off and go into its full Adashi cycle. Some of us will be able to go to Eartha and do that, where we will be able to enter Adashi and go back to the Edons in the Risha lay, I think is the next level of that activation. Some of us will go and work there until Eartha starfires. Some of us will visit Eartha once it comes back, because there will be teams left to hold the aurora field here. But it won't be something somebody forces you to do. The only people who will be left are the ones who want that job. Because in Krystic worlds, you only do what you love. You don't do stuff because you have to, right? Sometimes you do really hard things, but because it's worth it, because of something that's connected to the love of it. So it's not that anybody's going to force you and say, nope, you can't come home, right? Yeah, it will be very personal for everyone. But the Anastasia passage is the respirator at this point, because when Eartha blinks off and goes through its natural Adashi cycles, it's not going to be there to hold the aurora field anymore. That's why the indigos are going to be needed, some of them, to hold the Roche-Chalet activation on Earth to hold the aurora zone, because the aurora zone will create a three-dimensional reality system that is based on krystic, that has it has the base pulse rhythm and the coding of a krystic matrix, and that can still hold on to the Anson-Stacia passage, but that will have to let go once the sun enters its nova system, because that would travel, the gamma ray burst from that would travel right up the Anson-Stacia passage, and it would take out the hub of the other matrix, and they just don't let that happen. You can host to a point, but you're not going to try to host through a nova, because that just doesn't make sense, right? Because it would blow their matrix up. So they have to the point where there's certain conditions that take place in the core of the sun that would signal to them that it's entering its nova stage of its bardo. And at that point, and they said anywhere from about 500 to 1,000 years from now, that point would come. A lot sooner than science is thinking about, all suns go nova eventually. It's a lot sooner than science has ever imagined. One of the first things that happens is the core starts to heat, and that's even before the core gates close. That's why we're getting global warming. I mean, seriously, the core has been heating here because these gates have been getting closer and closer to compaction. Now, Earth's gates haven't compacted. They would have, as of the 25th, they would have followed the sun. And they haven't, because we already had the Arc of Aquarii anchored, which was the outer domain thing, and we already had the Anson-Stacia passage anchored, which was anchored during the 12 tribes 3